All right, I'm going to call the October 10th, 2023 regular council meeting to order. And I'll begin with a land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located within Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. It is because of our treaty relationship that we can live, work, and play on Treaty 6 territory. Okay, and there is nothing on consent agenda tonight, so I will ask for approval of the September 26, 2023 regular council meeting minutes. Somebody? Would you like to? Councillor Kelly? A second. Go ahead.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. I just want to get my dates correct, Madam Mayor.
September 26th.
Thank you. I move adoption of the September 26, 2023 minutes as presented to Council in our package.
Thank you. Are there any errors or omissions? Not seeing any. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. That is carried. Thank you very much. So now we will go into delegations, and delegations are for any individuals, any attendants who wish to speak to any of the items that are on the agenda that do not have a public hearing that is attached to them. Anything that's going to have a public hearing attached to it will be done at the public hearing stage. So the items on the agenda are bike skills facility feasibility study, Chabot Park, the Regional Agriculture Master Plan, Business License Bylaw, and the loan request for the Lions Club. And please note on that one, it's not about a campground expansion, it's only about a loan request. So just remember that when you are coming forward to speak, those are the parameters that are around it. So we do have 7 people who have pre-registered. Each will have 5 minutes to speak, and following that, you would have an opportunity for council to ask you any questions. All right, so we have the Fort Saskatchewan Trail Alliance who has registered first. Is there somebody here from the Trail Alliance? I'll have you come forward to the presentation podium. Just push the button, pull it down in front of you.
Gotta hold it down while I talk.
Just pull it down. Okay.
How's that?
Good. Okay, and you will have 5 minutes. So if you can just state your name, what item you're talking about, and they'll start the clock.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Colin Hafer, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Fort Saskatchewan Trail Alliance. And I'm here today to speak on behalf of our board about the Bike Skills Park. The FSTA was one of the 3 community stakeholder groups invited to share their insight into the feasibility study of a bike skills park in Fort Saskatchewan. And we are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to participate in that. Fort Saskatchewan is well known for its trail system, both paved and natural. As this community continues to grow, so does the need for recreational opportunities. Bike skills parks are growing in popularity worldwide and provide an opportunity for riders of all ages and skill levels to enjoy fine-tuning their riding skills. Allowing space for riders to grow these skills in a specific area lends itself to less negative encounters with other users on our multi-use trails. A small footprint in an often underutilized parts of our community can provide so much value. As video games dominate after-school activities and the cost of organized sports continues to rise, so it is the need for places that kids can go to enjoy themselves and be active. Bike parks are free, fun, challenging, and healthy places for users to connect and get their exercise in. In addition to our youth, they support a wide age range, from toddlers on run bikes to any age of person that can still throw their leg over a bike. Whole families adopt the park and make it a day of adventure. It is something we are lacking in this community, and the excitement of the possibility amongst our over 900 followers is palpable. Compared to more traditional parks and playgrounds, bike parks offer an incredible value versus the budget spent on them. Well-built facilities become tourist draws. They can attract events, which in turn lead to money being spent locally on amenities, food, repairs, and new equipment. It's one thing to build a bike park, but a bike park helps build something larger for a community. It helps build healthy, happy, outdoor lifestyle choices, which the FST is all for, and hopefully council is too. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I'll see if council has any questions for you. Councillor Kelly?
Colin, thank you. In your presentation, just a couple seconds or minutes ago, you made the statement that bike parks are free. What did you mean by that?
I mean that for people that use them in the community, there's no cost associated with it. You don't have to pay registration fees. You're not having to book lessons, pay for, like, for example, hockey, pools. They all have a cost associated with them. Every time you want to use that facility, you have to pay for it. Whereas a bike facility is free for children, adults to use anytime they want to.
But of course, the facility itself isn't free. That just means somebody else is
Yes,
paying.
I mean free to use for the users of the facility, for
but
sure.
not free. Thank
Correct.
you. One more question, if I may, Mayor Catcher.
Okay, go ahead.
As Vice Chair of the Trail Alliance, Colin, would the Trail Alliance and yourself be prepared to spearhead a project like this, much along the lines of, say, the skateboard enthusiasts did when they raised money for the skateboard park, or the volleyball group did when they raised money for their beach volleyball facility within the city?
So I think it's certainly something we could talk about in the future, looking at options like fundraising with our group.
So you're not against that?
I'm not against that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen, questions?
Yeah, thanks for your presentation this afternoon. Just a question, and this I think refers to one of the emails that council received regarding supporting the initiative and being involved in the operation of it. So can you give me an idea, and maybe you've talked about it a little bit with the board, what FSTA would be planning on doing should the city pursue an initiative like this to perhaps offset some of the costs and be involved in the maintenance and operations of a facility?
Yeah, so again, fundraise is something we can definitely look at going forward. As for the actual maintenance of it, right now we maintain the trails under a strict contract with the City of Fort Saskatchewan. So there is nothing in our agreement currently that would dictate us maintaining a bicycle park. That being said, we do have a very large group of volunteer base that I'm sure we could get involved with those activities. There is, from my experience anyway, at least an annual maintenance of a bike skills park that would take equipment that would be outside of what the Trail Alliance would have to offer for dirt work repairs. But aside from that, again, it's something we could definitely talk to our volunteer base about for sure.
Excellent, thanks.
Okay, thank you. That looks like all of the questions. So thank you for coming out this afternoon. This will be the next item once we finish delegations.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. The next person who has registered is Colleen Dulcis. Dolphus? Yes, this is the delegation part right now. You have 5 minutes to speak on any of those items that I indicated. So I'll just have you give your name for the record and which item that you want to speak to. No, there you go.
We on now?
Yeah.
Okay. So just right now, I was kind of hoping to wait to speak to the Lions Club thing later. But right now, I would like to speak to the skills park that he had just talked about. So,
Okay, you can you just pause that so you can roll it all into one because you get 5 minutes. Okay.
okay. I wasn't quite ready to go yet, but okay, here we go. So my question is for this, the skills park is, have they started to consult with any Indigenous people in our community? The reason why I ask that is because Indigenous people are left out of a lot of decision making when it comes to the land that's being used. I would like for history to be done, and of all of Fort Saskatchewan, because there's such a large amount of history in our area, the city of Fort Saskatchewan, 150 years actually of history that hasn't been recorded. And I would like for the city of Fort Saskatchewan and Shell and, or not Shell, Scotford and the RCMP to head this project to find the history out so that for future land use in our area, there's just the history of it. So, yeah. What else have I got there? Yeah, I wasn't quite ready. But that's it. I'm done for now. That's what my request is. And my question is for them is basically just we need to be more involved in all of the land kind of just the land stuff that goes on in the city of Fort Saskatchewan and in our history. It really needs to be done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for coming out and expressing your concerns. All right, thank you.
That was horrible, but thanks.
Okay. The next person who is registered to speak is Carol Slikinski. So for the record, you can state your name, basically which item that you want to talk to, and you have 5 minutes.
For sure. Yeah, it's Carol Slukinski, and my husband is Terry Ruto. And we're here to just ask some questions about the $150,000 loan and what exactly has been outlined for that money and what they're using that for. Have they given a report of exactly what the $150,000 is towards?
Okay, so that will be answered through, well, that was answered partially through the last presentation, and I'm assuming some of it will be covered through the notice of motion, but we don't get into answering questions. We're here to hear your concerns.
For sure. So I guess maybe we'll just go through some of the concerns. Was there a budget breakdown for this project? Surveying, land clearing, construction? Does the city have a detailed budget that includes estimates? How did you determine the project would cost $300,000? Concern is, what if this project goes significantly over budget? Is $300,000 enough to complete the expansion? Considering inflation with the cost of projects and that they're going over budget, our taxpayers going to be on the hook in the event that the Lions Club can't repay back this loan? Why can't the Lions Club go to the bank? Have they done a business plan? Do we have this information? What is the square footage of the land development area? What percentage of the overall land development will include removing trees? We're spending how much money on an urban forest plan to insert more trees? We talk about canopy trees in the old fort, how precious it is, how our community needs to preserve those areas, but we're not following that as leaders. Online feedback regarding the highlight of a need for better facilities of the Lions Club outside of what they're doing with what they're working with now. If they're planning to stay there long term, why aren't they long term investing in proper security, protecting the area, proper rules, proper signage, considering that they're neighboring onto residential homes right behind there? Why don't they have fire pits in the campground itself? Why? What's the contingency plan in the event that the Lions Club can't manage this? Does the city of Fort Saskatchewan taxpayers want the city to be managing this? Is it feasible? Has there been a feasibility test done to prove that this is feasible without volunteers? I'm here to say I love the Lions Club. Those are friends of mine, and they are making a huge impact in giving back to our community. But we have to be mindful that there are other things that have to be considered before we go any further. Is there a better way of $150,000 of the reserve from taxpayers? Is there a better way we could be putting that towards other projects in this community? Could this loan be deferred until the city was deliberated its budget of 2024? Like, are we just shooting blindly in the dark of these decisions? Those are my main points. And according to Mr. Patrick Noyan, no safety procedures or operating requirements have been imposed by the city of Fort Saskatchewan for the Lions Club beyond what's in the lease. Well, maybe possibly people are not feeling safe in this community without rules or operating procedures. Is it also possible that to prove that people staying there for short or long-term stays feel that they are able to conduct themselves without regarding that they border community and our precious green space for this entire community, with 5 or 6 propane tanks sitting on each lot, 3 or 4 vehicles, wash machines being delivered to a campsite? And have we proven that there is actually, that through businesses in this community, has there been in the last 10 years a proper engagement in this community to understand that people coming into this community realize what's going on? These are all my questions. We've had 126 people new people move into the Old Fort area. I don't know exactly the stats. I haven't worked that far, but that's 200. If there's 250 homes, that's 50% of the people in this area that don't even know this is going on. And I think that, and I personally think that we as taxpayers deserve a right to know and deserve more community engagement. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Are there any questions of Carol from council? Not seeing any.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.
You. Okay. The next one who is registered to speak, Susan Grono.
Is it all right if Patsy Colorado goes ahead of me? I had earlier requested that. Patsy, where are you?
No, actually, I've got the order as people have registered. Otherwise, I have to move other people around.
I can just talk after her.
Yeah, you can go after the registered ones. That's fine. Because I'll be doing an open call. Now, the next one, somebody has said John Fluker not attending, but having someone speak on his behalf. So you can come up, state your name, basically which item it is. And even though you say you're speaking on his behalf, you're actually speaking on your own behalf. And you will have 5 minutes. Oh, can you push the button? Thank you.
My name is Keith Cameron, and I was presenting this viewpoint on behalf of Mr. John Fluker of 102 108th Street, Fort Saskatchewan, who's unable to attend because he's out of the country. I'm going to edit this a bit because understanding this is supposed to be about the loan rather than the expansion, and so I'm going to have to sort of wing my way through this. I know that John spent well over 100 days last year attending the campground, looking at the usage of it, and he fixes the requirement for a loan based on the fact that they're going to need money for the campground and the expansion. So that's kind of the premise he went under. So I'm gonna skip all that. He's got a whole bunch of information about what he sees as what the usage is compared to what the usage has been presented by other sources of the campground. But I think the basic premise then of his would be skipping to page 5. If it were not for the industry, the success of the venture would not be where it is at present. In doing just a rough calculation with the fee schedule given to me by one of the current custodians of the campground, a month of 31 days has a potential of creating an income of approximately $47,500 a month for a 30-day month, $46,000 over the course of 6 months. Taken into consideration, the committee chair indicates that their capacity is full, having to regularly turn away clients. This venture could see a bottom line in excess of $281,000 plus per season. If one calculates this for the past years it's been operating, with the expansion it becomes a very substantial amount of money. This then brings into account, does the city need to approve an application for a $150,000 loan? I thank Council for the opportunity to present my objection to expansion and loan approval. Basically, the other information has to do with what he sees as the use of the campground, what has been used as compared to what he's understood the campground committee says it's being used as. Therefore, what is the need for a $150,000 loan?
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Cameron? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for coming out. Next person who is registered is Patsy Cottrell. Pardon? There are 3 slides associated with this presentation. Okay, if you can state your name, I guess where you live, and which item that you want to speak to. And remembering the parameters that I've set out.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Mayor Couture and councillors. My name is Patsy Cottrell, and I'm here to talk about the Turner Park campground expansion. I am from Edmonton, and I'm sure the last thing council wants to hear is someone from Edmonton telling them what to do.
Okay, and we're not talking about the expansion, we're talking about the loan or the bike facility.
Yes, I did hear you say that, Mayor Couture, and what I'm going to argue is that that expansion should not go ahead in Turner Park, and therefore you should not be voting on a loan today, because my understanding is that that loan is associated with the Turner Park expansion. So is that okay? I'm here to say why that expansion should not go forward in Turner Park.
Okay, I'm just going to have you pause for time. So several years ago, I'll just explain, the area was designated through the land use bylaw as a permitted use. So we're not approving the expansion today. We're going to talk about the notice of motion, whether to provide funding to the Lions Club. That's what we're talking about today. So that was determined, I don't know, back in 2020, 2019, that area is designated for campground, if that helps you.
Yes, but you're looking at an expansion, aren't you? There already is a campground there. So my understanding is that if you grant this loan today, the Lions will take the money and proceed to develop in that portion of Turner Park Forest. And that's what I'm opposing right now. So I was going to ask at the end of this presentation that you delay that vote and consider that there are alternatives, such as developing a campground in West River's Edge. This is what we would propose as a better location. My fear is that if this loan goes ahead, that the expansion in Turner Forest would go ahead, and it's surely possible for council to change their mind on a bylaw, get a different bylaw. And in fact, I know that in 2000, the council of the day actually refused the expansion that was currently asked for. as a result of opposition by local residents, and also that initially, way back in 1988 or 89, it was stated that that campground would be a temporary measure until a permanent location could be found. So this issue has been on the go for 30 years, and, you know, I still don't think a satisfactory location has been found. And I see this loan, if it's granted, as facilitating just going straight ahead with a Turner Park expansion. So can I make my statements as to why I think Turner Park should not be?
2 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Well, I just say that it will result in, the proposed expansion will result in 2.6 hectares being lost of natural forest, including canopy, understory of native shrubs and native herbaceous plants. Being a, do I press this? You can. This shows the extent of the proposed development. You can see where the river is, and that is actually that area there with the escarpment higher up on the other side of the asphalt trail is actually a river terrace, which means that it's part of the river valley, and the river valley is a key biodiversity area, which means that it's particularly important for wildlife, for foraging, for shelter, and for movement. And in this day and age, we cannot afford to be losing natural forest ecosystems. This isn't just trees, it's a whole ecosystem. And you did hear also that, well, I should say that from my experience with Fort Saskatchewan Prairie, and this is why I care about Fort Saskatchewan, why I'm here today, is that you cannot recreate ecosystems, not in anyone's natural lifetime. I would point out that that forest contains yellow lady slippers, which are orchids, which are a much valued flower, and that forest is an amenity value for people. So apart from the environment, the wildlife is also of great benefit to the park itself. And I would suggest West River's Edge as an alternative location. You can see how much space there is, especially in this vicinity, which in the 2021 campground location, just one more sentence, was actually designated, this area around the lakes, as being suitable for an expansion of the campground in the future. So that would be my recommendation. Don't vote today. Consider your alternatives, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Cottrell? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Shannon Stewart is next. Once again, state your name. If you don't live in the fort, then where you live and which item that you want to speak to and the parameters that I've put out.
Okay, hello. My name is Shannon Stewart. I live here in the fort. I've lived here for just over a decade now. Oh, and I'm here to speak about the campground loan. Sorry about, I'm messy. I came here from work today. I work in agriculture, so it's okay. So I've been a resident of Fort Saskatchewan for over 10 years now, and I feel like it's long enough now to really start to see this community change and grow, and feel like I have a bit of a stake in how this change is happening. Some of you might remember me from my interest in the Urban Forest Protection Enhancement Plan, and when I previously spoke regarding the section of Ross Creek that we recently acquired from Nutrien. So at that time, I spoke about the many physical, mental, environmental, social, spiritual, and even financial benefits of green spaces in our communities. And importantly, I introduced the idea that the more biodiverse a green space is, the higher the return on these benefits. So in other words, a park with green grass and shady trees is excellent, but a forested area has the flowers and berries that attract the birds and the bees and the deer, for example, that bring us that feeling of wonder and awe and spiritual connection. It may be obvious here that I'm here to speak in defense of Nature Park, and I recommend that the city does not loan money towards its expansion. What many others here have come to council today and in the past are trying to say is that this park is beloved to us residents because it is one of the most biodiverse green spaces in Fort Saskatchewan. We use it for exercise, to get food, for mental clarity, to share time and experiences with our neighbors. It keeps kids out of trouble. It keeps seniors out of the hospital. It raises value on all the homes around it. So I will emphasize that we are already making or saving money by keeping this forest. And I would even argue that keeping this space as natural as possible will probably have a greater economic impact in the long run than a few extra camping spaces. I know Patsy mentioned some of these items already, but I had a little note in here to remind you that the campground in the 80s was promised to be temporary, that the section of land is of interest to the Indigenous community because one of our pioneers who was Indigenous lived near the area, and they're trying to collect their history from that space. The decision made by City Council in 2021, I believe it was, authorized the campground subject to the approval of the expansion, the development permits, and this second phase hasn't been approved yet by the city, so we still have some time. I also wanted to kind of point out, I felt like it was bad optics when Mr. Weston made his presentation. I would say he almost threatened to reduce community services from the Lions Club if it wasn't approved, and alluded to using companies for people on the council, and I just think that that's pretty bad optics, I guess. I just wanted to close a little bit more about green spaces. They're being eliminated all around the world. It's endless urban sprawl. It's only going to continue as climate migration picks up. We really need to restart thinking about how we're valuing these natural spaces. It's sequestering carbon, it's cooling us down, and we just had the world's hottest summer on record. For years in a row, the world is on fire. We need our trees. Please plant more trees instead of cutting them down. Like, for example, if we were to build in the West River's Edge, we could build up trees for a campground there, and then we'd have 2 forested spaces instead of -1 forested space. So I would urge the council to not only vote no to proceed with the current request for a loan, but to actually consider reversing the decision made to authorize the campground in the first place, which I hope to return to speak about. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of Shannon? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. All right, so that's all the registered speakers. So the floor is now open for anybody who wishes to come up and speak to any of the items. This is your opportunity to do so. Call a second time. Okay, so nobody else is coming up to the podium, so that will close deliberation or delegations then. So thank you for everybody who came out to speak to any of these items. Thank you very much. So we are going to continue on with the agenda, and the next item on the agenda is 6.1 Bike Skills Feasibility Study. Sheila Gagnon and Brad Babiuk and somebody else coming up with you with a laptop.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Sheila Gagnon, and I'm the Recreation Development Coordinator. With me this afternoon is John Butchko with EDS Consulting. We are here this afternoon to present the findings of the Bike Skills Feasibility Study.
Excuse me, did you want Mr. Babiak with you? He's on the agenda, but I don't know. He showed up, so it's up to you.
Oh, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
The purpose of this report is to provide Council an informative technical study of an initial investigation of the feasibility of constructing a bike skills park within Fort Saskatchewan. I will give the following background information on this project. The notice of motion approved on November 8th, 2022 to support an initial investigation of the feasibility of constructing a bike skill park that includes the following: defining different scope and program options, options for supporting amenities, potential locations, Class 5 estimate for the project and operating impacts, and exploring options for grant funding. I will now have John present the study.
Thanks, Sheila. Thank you, Your Worship, members of Council. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Today I'm going to talk about the scope of our study, the site selection process, how we arrived at the 3 candidate sites at the end of the feasibility study, the selection criteria that we used to determine are going down from 17 down to 3 sites. We also had lightweight engagement with some user groups to test this against the public to get a sense of what direction we would have to move in the future, and we did that through a workbook, so I'll summarize those responses, and lastly to talk about the concept plans that were developed. We began the project visiting a number of sites. We saw about 15 different bike skills parks between Alberta and British Columbia, 9 of which are summarized in the report. Reason for that step was to get a sense of what other municipalities are doing, how big they are, how complex, are they expandable, what are the challenges they've had, what are some of the operational parameters that they put forward, and most importantly, how were they funded, how are they conceived, and how are they funded moving forward. So it was a good lessons learned opportunity. We've worked on a number of these across Western Canada, but it was a good way of consolidating all this information into one package. So this is an example of one that we saw in Devon. It's a fairly substantial, very successful bike skills park, fairly close to us here. We then started with a site selection process as a consulting team. We've been working in Fort Saskatchewan for about 20 years, so we got to know the city quite well. We identified 12 sites. Administration then came back and they identified 4 more to add to the list. And then when we added, when we had our engagement session, we actually added a 17th, and that happens to be one of our top 3. So really shows the value of engagement and how that process actually identified one site that wasn't on our list of 16. So this is just an image that depicts the general distribution of where they were. And we tried to pick a wide range, everything from brownfield in the middle of a brand new subdivision to some areas that are within the river valley, some areas that are within established municipal reserves. So again, a diverse first cut at the site, and then we would whittle it down through our selection process. So this is an example of one of them. This is site number 12 in the Forest Ridge area. So this is a municipal reserve or our public service area. It's owned as PS. It has a lot of opportunity within the site. Where exactly on the site it would go, that's yet to be determined through the design process. Nonetheless, an example of one of the 17 sites that we first explored. With the site selection criteria, this is a fairly robust process, and again, we came with, I think, a lot of success. It looks at everything from how accessible is it by vehicle, by trails. We looked at budget impact. Are there impediments on there that are going to cost us unnecessarily? For example, are we forcing it on the site that it requires a bunch of extra grading? We looked at things like site opportunities. Are there other things that are there already that really help and are compatible with the development. We looked at public risk, and one of the important things is ecological considerations. So one of the tasks that we had when we met with our limited stakeholder group was to scrutinize this list in detail, and one of the outputs of that was putting a higher ranking toward ecological protection. So that was something that came through in that process. When we went through the scoring, there's 3 individual scorers, myself, 1 individual from my design team, and somebody from administration. I think the selection criteria shows that it came with a lot of strength in that all 3 of us ended up picking the same sites through the process. So not a lot of subjectivity, very objective process that really helped us arrive at the top 3 sites that we scrutinized. Here's some general themes that we learned throughout the process, and through the workbook we found that bike enthusiasts, they like natural terrain, being able to combine a new amenity like this with existing features, so having nearby existing trails where possible. Whereas you do want to make sure that we do limit disturbance in natural areas. So if these are nestled up against trees or near an urban forest or even within a sensitive grassland, it's important that we try to eliminate any disturbances when possible. We need to replicate the natural features rather than putting in contrived ones. And rather than building a bunch of mounds, those break down over time. If we can find ones that naturally exist, it saves in the capital cost and certainly the operational costs over time. The second point is there's the perception that this development may be a disruption to residents. So if we do put in nearby a residential area, we have to do that lightly, and we have to do that with a lot of engagement and careful consideration of what the impacts will be to that residential area. So through the next steps that I'll talk about, engagement is important. Thirdly, involvement of Indigenous community is extremely important in the process. And I think that goes with any capital development project, certainly those that happen within natural areas. Fourthly, we need to avoid sensitive ecological areas, and through our engagement program, we learned that the perception is that even taking down a tree, a single tree, is an ecological impact, and we wholeheartedly felt that moving forward as a principle, if this was to be developed, we would try to do that, try to not take down a single tree if possible, because there are sites that do allow us to do that. The cost of the project can be greatly reduced if we take advantage of existing amenities. So one of the options we'll look at has a plus $450,000 if we need to put a washroom in. So if we can work with sites that already have these amenities, we really cut down the cost dramatically. The site selection criteria we found was very all-inclusive. It's very, again, it didn't come with any subjectivity in that it was consistent between the scorers. And lastly, and something, at the end of this, we really felt that bikers like open terrain. The environmentalists like the Brown Field and the contrived MR sites. Indigenous Relation Liaison wanted, nothing in the river valley or near natural areas. So really that came out of that mini session that we did. In the report, we've included 3 concept plans, and I'm just going to show this as an example. This is within West River's Edge, just north of the Ball Diamonds. This one, so each of these are a different scale. This one right now we're showing is 1 hectare big. You can go as small as half a hectare. You'll see that some of them are 3 and 4 hectares. So cost is really correlated with the size of it. We're not saying if you build here, you must build it to be 1 hectare. This is a feasibility study. This is saying that the appropriateness of this amenity does fit within the site. We could do this for $200,000. We can do this for $2 million. It really depends on what the level and the intensity is. Nonetheless, this is demonstrating some of the different types of skills and the diversity of activities that could happen within a bike skills park. The cost range of something of this size in this location is somewhere in the range of $600,000 to $625,000. That's at a Class 5 estimate, and that's assuming that we don't need additional parking or washrooms. Operationally, it really ranges depending on what we put into it. The more contrived it is, the higher it is. Operation costs generally range between 7 and 10% for amenities like this per year. So these are examples of the different types of features. You could use natural terrain, which the site does have, so you're not rebuilding any terrain, which saves you a lot of costs and also is easier to maintain. There are contrived things like wall rides. You can see the wood skills, amenities, and obviously those come with the higher costs. So the more of those you put in, the more they break over time. The more natural terrain and more pump track style and flow through, the less operational costs over time. The second example here being shown in Turner Park, this one is much smaller. So again, if we were to introduce this kind of amenity in this area without taking trees down, without affecting grades, we just don't have the footprint, but could still achieve a style of bike park that's compatible. The cost range of this one is in the general range of the last one, much smaller, but because you're working in amongst trees and having to do so more sensitively, the cost does go up to do that. So this is one where, you know, it scores very high, but it did, in the process, we did recognize that there were potential concerns with the Indigenous significance of this site. The third site in West River's Edge, here, this is an open play field in that there's plenty of room. Does it go here? Does it go to 100 meters to the west-north? There's some considerations here. These are old gravel pits. They have been highly disturbed in the past, so we want to take advantage of the fact that these are previously highly disturbed sites. This one is of a larger scale because we have the space, but it is segregated. So here's where, you know, we show a cost because of this one is 2 hectares large that we're showing, hovering around $1 million, but we would probably need a washroom, a pump out washroom here that comes at a significant cost. So that's a consideration moving forward. Keep in mind, these are all feasible. These are all expandable. You could start with something half a hectare for $200,000 and you can grow it over time. And as you either get more funding, you get certainly more interest from the community, you can grow these. So there's nothing saying that if to do this, you need $1 million to get into the game. So as for next steps for projects like this, and I'll really just touch on 3 things. The first one is engagement. We did a very, very lightweight engagement process only because this was a feasibility study. Moving forward, we would work with likely these 3 sites as potential candidates. Sites that, for example, were old gravel pits, we're not going to have to do much for environmental assessments, and we probably know the ecological sensitivities are going to be low, whereas other sites that are nestled into trees, different story. So more background studies may have to be done. The second thing is partnerships. The city shouldn't do this alone. They should be identifying a local group, creating a local group. We're finding one that exists and expanding their portfolio so the city can work with them to help with funding. A lot of local community groups can access funding that the city can't. Moving forward, we really highly recommend the city stay in the game. We've seen many of these fail over time when local groups were taking them over entirely, so the city has to have some vested interest into it, but nonetheless the partnership is important. And again, communication I think is extremely important. Once we know of the potential sites moving forward, to go to a design process, we can then start to identify who some of these stakeholders would be. Thanks.
Okay, next steps for this process. The council motion to initiate this project specifies an initial investigation and feasibility of constructing a bike skills park, and consequently, the report is written as council information report. If council wishes to continue to progress the bike skills park project, administration recommends that council refer the bike skills park feasibility study back to administration for continued work beyond the initial investigation and feasibility study. Administration has developed 5 alternatives for council's consideration. The first alternative mentioned in the previous slide has council refer the bike skills park feasibility study back to administration for continued stakeholder engagement, analysis, further site assessment, development of a site recommendation, recommended capital budget funding sources and timing, and operational impacts to be brought back to council by March 31st, 2024. Alternative number 2 has council refer the bike skills park for inclusion in the horizon list of the 2024 10-year capital plan. Alternative number 3, council refer the bike skills park with a specific site name for inclusion in the 2024 capital budget deliberation with a request of 10% of project cost estimate for conceptual planning and detailed design. Alternative 4, council refer the Bike Skills Park site name for inclusion in the 2024 capital budget deliberations in a set year of the 10-year capital plan. And alternative number 5, Council may, with consideration of the Bike Skills feasibility study, determine that no further action is required at this time and no motion is made by Council. This concludes our presentation and we're happy to take questions.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. So I will open it up to questions, and any debate and commentary should be left for any motion that comes forward. Councillor Macon.
Thank you for the presentation today. I'm curious if we have, when we were gathering the precedent site information, if there was information on their funding models for those sites that might be readily be available.
Yeah, through the chair, in that investigation, we had conversations with most of the municipalities, and so I think the most common finding in British Columbia, the ones that were more established, where user groups came and we said, we've got 200 grand, let's build it. Then they built it, and then they realized, oh, but we're tired and we don't have money to maintain it, and we can't keep fundraising. So they relied on the municipality. In Squamish as an example, I visited 4 bike parks that were all closed. They were built and they were shut down because they just ran out of money. And then they put all their eggs in one basket. So that was the old model. The newer model, and certainly what you see across Alberta, and I think exclusively in Alberta, is they're 100% maintained and managed by a municipality, but the conception of them was through some sort of partnership, whether it was 10%, 50%. You didn't see, groups coming to fund 100% of it. It's usually 50 or less percent that a user group would come forward with. So at the onset, there is the ownership of a third party of a user group that would help fund it. Operationally, there's only certain things that a city wants a volunteer to do from a safety perspective and a legal perspective. So there are things you can identify, like cleaning up the garbage. Maybe it's a builder's day to do certain things, but you don't want equipment there on those days. So there are some things that from a liability perspective, municipalities have identified that they want to do themselves or procure themselves properly through proper insurance and safety protocols. So that generally is the model.
So is that information available though? Like if we wanted to know of these, I forget how many there were, 10 or 12 president sites, how, like this one in Edson cost 900,000 and 500,000 came from a donor, 200 from taxpayers, 200 was raised. Like, is that information readily available through the work that you've already done?
Yeah, through the chair, we have some information for some of them. A lot of the individuals we met with didn't have, some of them were predated and didn't have the current information.
Okay.
We could probably access a few of them, I think.
A little bit, yeah.
Moving forward in the next phase of it, I think when we come to, if this does move to the next step, I would expect that proponent or that group would bring some of that forward to compare the proposed model against what others have done.
Sure. And then my next question then, I was a little bit disappointed with this section on the funding sources, only because it didn't provide any new information. It basically says grants, volunteers, donations, municipalities. Like that is already known information. I guess what I was looking for is where it says exploring options for grant funding. I guess what I was looking for is examples and understanding that grants come and go. But what is out there right now? What types of grants have been applied for by other bike parks? I guess that's information I thought was missing in there.
Sure. Through the chair, I would respond to that by saying that this is no different than most municipal parks. There's nothing magic about these, and I wish I had an answer that to say, because this is a skills park, we can access different types of funding. I think currently the trend right now is around tourism. Around tree protection. If we were to, for example, integrate this with the 10 billion trees program, or certainly the province is looking to bolster tourism. If we were to throw a tourism spin to this, it could maybe attract more, different types of funding. I think from my perspective, and something I alluded to earlier, was by engaging a group and by working with a local community group, those groups tend to have access to 2 times more opportunities than maybe not as large, but then as municipalities would. So that would be something we would encourage. But I wish there was something I could identify that is new, but there's nothing that we're aware of that this brings forward as a new funding opportunity.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Blizzard.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. So, can I assume that when you went to see the other parks, were they in use? Were there kids on there, adults using them?
Yeah, through the chair, some of them were actively being used. It was early spring, I think, when I was out there. And I would say half of them had, one actually had a full-out event where there was about 80 people, so it was very actively used. For the most part, these are, and that was, during the week, during the daytime, so less use than you would see on a weekend.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to get at with this. So, was the parking lot pretty full when you went to them, or was parking an essential part of it? Because I have a concern with some of the locations that you kind of put in parking as a low value, but to me, I would think that'd be essential.
Yeah, through the chair, for the most part, people walk or bike there. Parking lots are quite small, and some of these there's enough room for 6-7 cars. The one for example in Squamish, which is one of the bigger bike communities in all of Canada, there's probably stalls for 4 or 5 cars.
What's the population of Squamish?
Squamish, I'm gonna guess it's, boy, I'd be guessing entirely. It's certainly the size of Fort Saskatchewan.
Okay. Okay, and have we taken into consideration? So that was question one. Other amenities in the area, because my concern with one of the selections is that it's right next to the Fort Saskatchewan Prairie. If you have a bike park by there, and I walk there pretty regular, but there's posts, there's signs, the blockades put into the prairie to avoid bikers going in there. But I think if we had a bike park right next to it, we would see more bikers within the prairie. Has that been considered? Because to me, that could be an issue.
Through your worship, the interpretive forest that is beside the site that is at West River's Edge, beside the Dow Diamonds, that has the interpretive forest, and it is already fenced off. It does have paved trails that go around the forest, and within that forest, there's no single-use trails in it because it is a protective forest. So people, if they were parking, let's say at West River's Edge Pavilion or down by the boat launch, they would generally be using, let's say, the multi-use paved trails to go around to locate onto the Bike Skills Park. There is street parking also right close to there that would have a few parking spots as well.
Okay, I'll leave it like that for now.
Okay, I can always come back on another round. So I'm next in the speaking order, and the question that I have is, so what age group is this for? And I'm only asking that because I thought when this came forward, it was supposed to be for little people, but this sounds like it's pretty adventurous. So what kind of age groups are we talking about?
Your worship, this skills park can be for a variety of age, from kids as young as 3 and 4 who are on the bikes without the pedals yet, doing the pump tracks, all the way up to youth, adults, active agers are also. It's generally skill bike parks will have a variety of different levels. So you'd have beginners, intermediate course, and then expert course. So the person would, of course, do the skills that they are confident with, and then progress upwards if they so choose so.
Okay, and then my next question that I have, question 2. So with your conversations with the Trail Alliance, how many people are we talking about in the community? Because that's always something that we're curious about. How many people are we talking about for potential use?
Oh, for potential use of the park. We have I feel we have a high bike interest. I don't have an exact number. The Trail Alliance is an organization that has a service agreement with us that use the single-use trails for walking, hiking, snowshoeing, biking. So they have a variety of different members that help maintain the trails. But as far as biking goes, I don't have an exact number, but we don't have like a biking club per se, but we do know residents are very fondly using our single-use trails and also our multi-use paved trails throughout the city, enjoying biking.
Okay, thank you. So those are my two questions. I'll probably come back on round two. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. In your comments, sir, you referenced what I perceive to be a fairly common model, particularly in Alberta, where bike parks, the bike park itself was initiated and promoted by a user group. Is that accurate?
Through the chair, yes, that tends to be where they start. A user group identifies it, comes to administration to say, or a city to say, okay, this is something that we want.
And I know when the subject was first in front of us, I went online and looked at, I think, Edson. My recollection of that is that the user group, they're funded through grants or whatever, that they arranged themselves, something like 50% of the actual cost. Is that consistent with what you recall?
Through the chair, the individual I met with at the time in Edson didn't have that information, but from my past work and having designed Voyageur Park, that's approximately the value that we were told.
In your estimation, one last question, Mayor Katcher. The first two were my first, by the way. Sorry, I had to. How long, given that this isn't a user group initiated sort of thing, how long would it take Sheila, I suppose, to identify and organize a user group that would have the ability to promote something like this to the riders and bring back to council a better report on the need and demand and wants and how we're going to pay for this facility? How long would it take to do that? Because I don't think 6 months is enough time. That's a big question, I know. Wing it.
Maybe we'll put it to Mr. Babiak because
Sure.
he's her.
Absolutely.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly. Well, I think what we heard this afternoon was the Trail Alliance would be interested in having conversations about that, but they have not had those conversations with their group. I think in terms of an initial discussion to see if that's an approach they'd be willing to pursue, we could kind of have an answer on that within that 6 months, but an actual full-fledged funding plan, that may be aggressive for that timeline. I think the initial thought around the recommendation is to kind of do more further work on coming back with a specific site recommendation so that we actually understand the scope and everything else. And then that we could have that conversation about what would a 50% be, because obviously it's quite a bit different between the one that could be up to $1 million versus the one at 600,000, and engage them more fully, as well as the general community and kind of more of that stakeholder stuff. So I don't know if I could give you a definitive yes or no on the 6 months, but yeah, I would say it would be aggressive in terms of getting them to some kind of commitment in that timeline.
Thank you. And Mayor Katcher, I'm prepared to make a motion on this when the time arises. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the presentation. I just had a question around the operational commitments for a facility of this type. It's showing kind of 7 to 10% of the complete budget for operations. I've been to the one in Sherwood Park, and it looked to me like dirt mounds, a pump track. It didn't seem like there'd be too much to do there besides cutting grass and whatnot. Can you give us an idea, a little bit better of an idea of what we'd be looking for operations?
Sure, through the chair to Councillor Nguyen. I think this situation of Strathcona, it's very well used, very worn. You would have to eliminate erosion, and with that process, it involves machine packing, tampering to rebuild those mounds to make sure you don't have any erosion building up or any hazards. To opt to maintain a facility like that, in my estimate, that's about a $200,000 facility of capital cost. There are not a lot of constructed features. You don't have a lot of screws, nuts, and bolts and wooden things that can rot and break. It's mostly earth and mounds. So that's earthworks. It's vegetating areas that are peripheral to that might be wearing down to try to restore the grass. But to keep the mounds, if you keep hitting the top of a hill, it gets lower and lower and becomes less and less playful. So it's to make it more playful. Also operationally, you assume that you find where the problems are, and you may have to reroute things if people are hitting hills in the wrong direction that's unsafe and you want to reconfigure things. That could be another cost. But in circumstances like that, it's mostly skid steer, tamper, water truck, things like that.
Okay, thanks. And that's great to know that was a $200,000 facility in Shord Park, because that gives me an idea of kind of what we're looking at for the scale of the proposed designs. My other question, it might be for admin. So if we do make a motion here today for this, so we'd basically be going from, like, you would want to see from council a location, a proposed location preference, followed by a design of scale, and then a budget driven design for it. Is that kind of the decision-making process we'd be looking at if we were to go ahead with something like this?
I'll send that to Mr. Babiak or Mr. Fleming, whoever chooses.
Through your worship to Councilor Nguyen. Our initial recommendation was to go back and let administration do a little more work in terms of fully fleshing out the three recommendations and come to likely bring back one for council to make a decision on. But obviously the alternatives are there, that if council feels comfortable that they want to select the project and put it in them, like select themselves of the three right now and put it in, that absolutely is one of the options available to council.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Municipalities operate in a very litigious environment. And we can be sued at any time. And we are often sued for many things that we undertake, facilities we develop, facilities we maintain. As administration looked at when we build a facility of this type, and we're creating risk-oriented use, have we looked at the liability that it would it would attract, and how we would mitigate that in any way, shape, or form? Obviously, with recreational facilities, we have to do appropriate due diligence to do that. So have we looked at the liability issue relative to this, and if not, why not?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, this initial study was a feasibility study. Was there space available? What would it look like? It didn't really have the scope in our interpretation to operationalize the details of what it would cost or what those insurance or risk mitigations. Okay. I mean, John might want to speak to the design mitigating some of the risk, but
no, we don't have to get into the detail. I just was looking for you to ultimately to espouse that. My second question is, and it kind of goes along Councillor Kelly's line. I'm looking at the alternatives, and that ultimately gives. And would this give you better direction if we were to pursue alternative number one with maybe some additional stuff like what I just raised relative to the liability issue, and I'm not interested in talking about sites yet. There's a lot more due diligence that needs to be done. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, there's absolutely more things that could be investigated by administration.
Good. I wouldn't want to see a site at this point in time, so ultimately you would bring that back if we moved alternative number one with some additional parameters added into it. And I sense Councillor Kelly might be moving in that direction.
Okay, we're not asking him that right now.
Yeah, no. I'm asking if that's the direction that ultimately we're looking at. So
we will find out shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going on to round two. Councillor Macon. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to ask my question without a rambling. of a little bit of information. So bear with me, I guess, a little bit. I'm not sure how to do that. I think that what I was expecting was that we were going to choose a site today to move forward on rather than administration going back and continuing to do more work on it. So I guess what my question would have been on that is that if we selected a particular site, one of the comments was made during the presentation was growing a park, right? And so what I guess maybe expected to see a little of or was hoping to see was a plan where, like, looking at it, I like site one. So, but what does that look like in terms of could we build a $50,000 small dirt track this year? And then in what's year 2 and then it stays like that in what's year 5, and it gives the opportunity for fundraising for further amenities and stuff. So I guess I'm trying to ask, like, how do we incorporate growing a plan into this information that we're receiving when we're trying to make this decision?
Through your worship, I'll start with to respond to that. Phasing it is highly, highly, highly recommended. You find out early on who's actually showing up. Are we talking about the tots? Are we talking about the grown and adults? Are we attracting, is this a sports tourism opportunity for us? You don't know that at the onset, and it takes a few years for you to develop that. So I highly encourage a plan that can start not necessarily small and tiny. It could start grand, $100,000, $200,000, $200,000, whatever's within the means to test it. It's challenging and we've talked to a lot of groups that have had startup organizations that all this excitement and a bunch of teenagers show up, so they wrap it around teenagers, but then the young groups come out and they say, well, but what's in it for us? So again, by introducing it in a small, meaningful way, you help through time identify. It's like long-term engagement. Who's really showing up? Who's really fundraising for these things? Who's really our champions here? And then you could grow your next phases around that. Okay, and then my second question, I guess, would be, maybe you could speak to what is the risk of selecting a site today? Like, I have 2 sites that I think I don't even want to discuss, and one seems to be, in my opinion, the best location. So I guess if we went ahead and did that, what are we missing here? What is the work that needs to be done to rule out sites? I guess what would we be losing by selecting a site today?
Through your worship to Councillor Macon, I would say the thing that immediately comes to mind is the public engagement piece of engaging with the community on what they thought would be the better site, or at least hearing feedback related to the sites would be the first thing. From an administrative perspective, as John mentioned, some of the sites, there's less concern about the environmental impacts, although we'll double check, due to them being in former gravel pits and stuff. Like, they're very disturbed land. So again, depending on which site is selected, there would be some different concerns potentially related to that. With site number 1, I think the biggest one would be stakeholder with the public, but also with the slow pitch and Nordic ski. Just again, they were made aware that this was happening, like the feasibility study was happening. But this would be them a more specific chance for them to respond to it, just to hear what their potential concerns or, in a perfect world, opportunities they see may exist. As we looked at things, we considered things like amenities that exist at the Ball Diamonds that would mean we wouldn't have to necessarily build things, and it may actually help them for some of their concessions or some of certain building business cases for other things. But we haven't had those in a detailed fashion. So I'd say that's primarily the biggest concern, I would say.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Blizzard.
One of the things I had was the liability too. That to me is a concern. I know we all like to first bubble wrap children and then see them go on these giant hills. And have there been lawsuits in other communities? Because I think that's something we should look at, is what do we need for liability, or build it so that maybe it's not as dangerous. I mean...
Yeah, through the chair, I can't speak to that professionally on the liability side, although anybody that I did interview in that process, none were aware of any legal circumstances that arose from the bike park.
Okay. And I guess one other thing, I don't know if it's a proper question, but
Make it in the form of a
I'll make it in the
question.
form of a question. Yes. So I see you have sites 1, 2, and 3, but as I look down, can't we also look at maybe, and one in particular is site number, choice number 5, site 13. Can we not expand it a little bit? Because to me, the one site that was picked, I think number 3 in the choice, is probably as far away from so much of the population. If you've got a little, we're talking about little kids in their, what do you call them, pedal bikes, or not pedals, push bikes. You never get a kid over there, a parent that has 2 kids in with something like that. It's so far away, but the entrance to West River's Edge is close to the ball diamonds, close to the dog park, close to so much more that I think the value of location, is that not true? There's my question.
Through your worship, when we took a closer look at 13, there's what do you say, the flood. The land there has water in it, so then it would erode if we had a bike park there.
Okay.
The unique thing about site 14, which yes is further, I mean, maybe there's some synergies that we could have with the dog park parking lot, have trails going out towards the bike skills park, so it's not as far. So there's those things to look at too, but looking at the land and also what the soil is would be also part of the next step.
Okay. And I guess one more tied in with that would be supervision. So when we talk to the ball diamond people that use it, I've talked to an awful lot of people that find that the kids are in the playground and aren't supervised. They go all over. So if we now have a bike hill and parents go over there, could that not be an added risk as the kids are, or as the parents are playing ball?
I think it would be a good risk to give the children something to do. Build their confidence on bikes.
Okay. Just let me know if you need a round 3 for questions. Councillor Harris, questions?
So, Mr. Babiak, this refresh my memory. So this whole thing came out of a councillor who had probably been talked to somebody about the need for this facility in our community, and this ultimately gave rise to you doing this analysis thus far. Is that correct?
Through your worship, Councillor Harris, that's correct.
So there is no time-specific burning need to do this, so it makes sense, in your opinion, to do appropriate due diligence and planning and all the things that you're suggesting in alternative number 1, for example, in your report. Is that a fair assessment? We got a lot more work to do, in other words, in your opinion?
Councillor Harris, yeah, our recommendation is we would take it back and do some further.
Good. Thank you very much. That's what I needed.
Okay. Are there any other questions at this point in time? If not, Councillor Kelly, what motion are you considering? Go ahead.
Councillor Harris gets the answer to his question, Mayor Katcher. I move option number 2, that council refer the Bike Skills Park for inclusion in the Horizon list of the 2024 10-year capital plan. And speaking to that motion, I actually like the concept and idea of a bike park. I think it's an excellent amenity for the community, just like our skateboard park and multiple other things that we have. I think, though, strongly believe that this type of amenity should be community driven. When we heard from the Trail Alliance, they expressed a lot of enthusiasm and a willingness to start working on something, or at least consider working on something. I think it's critical that we have user and community buy-in. And if the city is going to play the parent and simply hand it over at the end of the day, you don't get the buy-in. And I don't have a strong concern with option number 1, other than we're not going to get the community buy-in and the involvement and allow those people to get organized and discuss and raise a membership, raise enthusiasm in 6 months. And until we get community buy-in, and until we get a community involved in this, we won't know what it is we really need for a bike skills park. And until we know what it is we really need for a bike skills park, we really can't select a site. So I also, the Horizon list doesn't mean we park it forever. It means it's there, council looks at it, but it also gives an indication to the user groups, and I'm looking at the gentleman at the back as I speak, that it's now up to you folks. Get organized, tell us what the need is, demonstrate the need in the community, and approach administration. Work with administration to get this project moved from the Horizon list back onto the capital plan. And that can happen in 6 months if in fact you can get organized and do it in 6 months. It can wait 2 to 3 years if it takes that long. And that is really the problem I had with option number one, is the defined timeline of March 31, 2024 isn't a lot of time to do what I think is the critical work here. It's the community involvement. And we've heard from our consultant that, in fact, a lot of these types of projects around Alberta happen that way. Those that are interested, I can speak for sure about Edson. I was on that website when this subject first came to council. They have a great website. It talks about the history of the project, the enthusiasm, and what they were able to accomplish because of all of that. And I don't think you get that by reverse engineering the process. By talking down, it's that to come up, not down. And I don't think the city has to lead the discussion from above. The discussion should be led from below. It should come from the community, and I just think that needs to be the operating way, pardon me, not the operating way, the standing policy of the city for projects like this. We're open to any idea, but get organized, bring it to council. Don't ask administration, don't ask council to approve a budget to send administration out to build something or to plan something that you want. And I'll summarize again, a long ramble I know, but we're not Walt Disney. We don't have the philosophy, at least I certainly don't have the philosophy, that if we build it, they will come. This is a community project. It should be community driven. And Mayor Katcher, those are my opening comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Kelly has put option 2 on. So that's the one that will be open for discussion and debate. Councillor Harris, you're next.
Some of what Councillor Kelly just said I can agree with. But as I said in my last question, or in my line of questioning administration, I believe there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And some of that ultimately is to work with groups like the Trail Alliance and the general community at large, and that's part of the overall engagement process to ultimately determine the feasibility of this from a public interest standpoint. And I don't think putting in the Horizon list yet is something that I can support from that standpoint, but I can support, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, this is an alternative that administration put forward. We can put anything we want on the table, and we can put on whatever timelines we want. I would suggest that I am more amenable to alternative number 1 with an initial report back to council by March the 31st, laying out a lot of the things that administration has heard from us today, which will then allow us to gauge the level of interest in the community to move to a phased development of something like this, if and as required. But there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I look at the list of the options, and I had a chance to sit on the bench beside the one north of the Ball Diamond yesterday. And I walked through that area, and I thought that was great. My first thought was, well, the Nordic Ski Club runs 2 of their trails through that area, and yeah, you're going to have a consultation with them. But they've got the rest of West River's Edge, and it's a big area. It makes a lot of sense. So I can't support Councillor Kelly's recommendation on number 2. I could support number 1 with some modifications to the wording for definitely more engagement, because, and I agree with you, Councillor Kelly, we don't need to be building things that aren't going to be used, and that the community ultimately doesn't give us a very strong groundswell of support. We heard from the disc golf group last week. They want a disc golf thing. Well, fine. But I can't see it being used. But what do I know? We need to hear from the community about things like that. And this one is exactly the same way. We need to know that there are 450 people. We need to know that there are 7,000 people in this community that would support this kind of a thing. Those are ad hoc numbers, of course. So that's why I guess I can't support alternative 2, but I could support alternative 1 with some modifications to the wording. So administration goes out, does a whole bunch more homework and engagement with the community, and ultimately some more refinement on some of the alternatives that were presented in the report, similar to what I guess Councillor Macon is saying. So on that basis, I don't think I could support what you're suggesting, Councillor Kelly, but I could support alternative number 1.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. I can share some of the sentiments of Councillor Harris. Question for administration first. So if this motion should pass, there is no further work that administration is going to do until it comes back off the horizon list. Is that correct?
Mr. Fleming?
Yeah, through your worship, I don't think there would be a lot that we would be doing actively unless a group came forward or council at some point along the way initiated more work.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for that answer. Yeah, my concern about placing it on the horizon list right now is that we have allocated funds for this study and the consultant to come back to council. And I think there is some good work and some options. I just don't want this work to be forgotten at the moment. And if it comes back in maybe a future council, even 5 or 6 years down the road, we have to re-engage a lot of the discussion and information that we're seeing before us right now. So I would like to see some more planning done. I really appreciated what the consultant said, that this can be a phased construction approach to a facility like this. So we're not going to be committing to $900,000 park. We can potentially do it in phases of $100,000, $2,000, garner some community support for it from user groups and potentially industry sponsorship, find grant funding for it, which can be work that can be done through various parties. So I would like to see this come back sooner than placing it on the horizon list. So for this, at this time, I'm not going to support the motion up front of us.
Okay, thank you. I was next on the list. That was basically the question that I had was about the horizon list. Councillor Macon, you're next.
Thank you. So I don't support this motion, but it's not that I don't support it going on the horizon list, because I do, but I do think that there is more work to do right now in order for it to be ready to go on the horizon list. So what I would like to see happen is that, like Councillor Harris had said, I'm more leaning towards option 1. It doesn't have to be March 31st. It could be June 30th. And then it comes back with more information and we can actually choose a site. I would hope that there would be more information on a phased approach to doing it. And then and this probably, before I finish, is a question of administration. What does a project need in order to get to a shovel-ready time, I guess, in the project? Because I guess my question is, if we park it on the horizon list, to me, it should be in a place where the grant funding becomes available, or our user groups, they fundraise enough money, and so there are pieces and stuff that we can move forward to, and we can move it off. And there's grants that do come up from time to time that the city can access that are, hey, if you have shovel-ready projects in this, then you have 2 weeks to submit something. So to me, if we're going to park it, then it should be to a certain readiness point.
Through your worship, I think I understand the question. Typically, when we use the term shovel-ready, or for the sake of grants, shovel-ready usually refers to the part of the process where you've done your detailed design and the project is ready to go. Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit of a difficult situations for municipalities because there are occasionally grants that come out and they want shovel-ready projects, but you have to spend a significant amount of money to get it to a place where it is in fact shovel-ready. I think the one example we have right now is the Highway 15 expansion, where we actually went through the design process and it's about ready to go. So we actually have a shovel-ready project. Most times we're not even in a place where we have one of those. So to get it to a place where it's true shovel-ready, you would want to approve at least, usually it's 10 to 15% of your capital, your overall budget, and you get your detailed design work done. There are still things you could do without going through the design process. We could still work on some of the logistics, work with the community groups and things like that. But how well you'd be able to qualify for a grant, it depends on the criteria of the grant. I don't think there's much out there right now.
Right.
Unless, like our presenter said, you can frame it in terms of a grant that is out there, like tourism was a really good example. But otherwise, I don't know that there's much now. But over the next 2-year stretch, as we ramp up to elections and other levels of government, that could change.
Right. Okay. So I guess back to my little bit of rambling. I would prefer to move on with the next phase of this project, just to get it to a better place where user groups can say, okay, we know where it's going to be, and if we want the project to start, we need to raise this amount of money, and we know where it's going to be, and puts us in a better position to apply for grants should they come up. So I do think that this is going to end up on a Horizons list, but I do think that we do need to finish this work that we've started before we get there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Blizzard.
Well, initially I thought the Horizon list was good, but I kind of agree with all the others that have been said. I like option 1, but I think as Brad said right away, maybe with a longer date, because you made it sound like March 31st would be pretty rushed to try and get anything done. And I'd also then, whenever that deadline is, maybe get a picture. Are there user groups? Do they have some grants? Because, if they're not going to buy into it and help try and support this, why are we? Obviously, there's not that much interest. And also, I'd like to go beyond what Councillor Macon said. Instead of just shovel ready, in the end, we spend a lot of money on studies. And then if we even put it on the Horizon list, when it comes back at some point, it ends up having to be another study for whatever reason. It would be nice to at least have, say, phase 1, as was mentioned earlier, one little lap of some, whether it's a dirt path or something through there, so that we can have a start and then assess in the future whether a location can always be changed if it's just a dirt path. Is it the right location? Does it get used? Do we have issues with parking? So some of that could be maybe looked at too.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing anything else on discussion and debate. I'll go to Councillor Kelly for close on his motion.
Yeah, thank you. I don't disagree with anything that's been said here. It's just I truly don't understand what work you think the city needs to do so that the user groups can become involved. I don't understand that. We've identified in this study 3 potential sites with a preference for a particular site. That seems pretty obvious. What more work do we need to do to pick a site? If somebody can tell me what work we need to do, I might be prepared to soften my approach on this. I don't know what we're supposed to do. And until we hear from the user groups as to what they need, we can't really decide what we need for a bike park. And until we decide what we need for a bike park, we can't pick a location. So I think and there's a couple councillors use words like forgotten. No, I disagree with that. Doesn't mean administration or council has forgotten. What it does mean is that we're waiting for the community to pick up the ball. That's what it means. And if they don't pick up the ball, eventually it will be forgotten, certainly, but not in the next 6 months or a year. I heard comments like parked on the Horizon list. No. Putting it on the Horizon list doesn't mean we're parking it there. This means we've done a study. Here's some initial information, community. Take a look at it. Study it, talk to your friends, talk to your cohorts. Let us know what you want and how you'd like to approach this. And when we're ready, we can move it off the horizon list at any council meeting at any time in short order. And then we get that point in time, once we know the community involvement and we know that we have a buy-in from the community for something and they have a vision, we could then allocate the money to identify the proper site and do some planning around the proper site. Number 2 and number 1 are so similar. It's just at what stage do we do the work? And I'm just suggesting to council that we do the work once we know we have a community need. Not do the work and then wait to see if we have a community need. And that's the only difference between the two. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I honestly believe in this particular example, the community needs to come first and step forward. And that's, I rest there, Mayor Katcher. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So the motion is that council refer the Bike Skills Park for inclusion in the Horizon list of 2024 10-year capital plan. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. Motion is defeated 5-1. All right. Councillor Harris?
I think administration has heard from council a lot of interesting things today, and we've heard some stuff relative to the technical stuff from the consultant. But there's still, as I think we've all agreed to, there is a lot of work left to do.
Do you have a motion?
And, you know, I'm trying to figure out whether or not one needs some change. There's no question about it. I'd be prepared to put alternative 1 on the table with a change of the timeline to June 30th, 2024, and with additional parameters added into it to suggest that we really need to engage the community relative to the things that Councillor Kelly talked about. I'm nowhere near making a decision on a site. Yeah, I thought it was good information, but I'm not there. And it really comes down to needing more public engagement. So I'm suggesting to administration, if this alternative 1 goes on the table and is voted on, that's the sort of thing that I'd want to see with some modifications. So how would we do that? So
you're putting the motion on? Well, you can put the motion on with any date that you want. They would just change it.
Yeah, I would.
It says stakeholder engagement. What is your point of order?
I don't mind Councillor Harris verbalizing how you'd like the motion to read, but perhaps what we could do is have a 5-minute recess because we're overdoing that and allow Councillor Harris some time with the administration to firm up the resolution.
Yeah, and I think that's a good suggestion, Councillor Kelly, because I want to make sure that it's relatively crisp and that administration really understands.
So I just need to know, do you have substantial changes or is it just the date change?
Date and a couple of things that I want to talk to Mr.
Okay, let's take
about.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll have a comfort break as well. We'll have a recess. Okay. So 3:37 to 3, so 3:45, 3:47. Okay, we'll recess to 3:47 so you can have your comfort break and we'll resume at that point in time. Okay, we will break from the recess. Councillor Harris, you have your motion that you'd like to read in. Can you push your button?
We have the revised wording. Put it up on the screen.
Okay, you can read it in.
I move that council refer the Bike Skills Park feasibility study back to administration for continued user engagement, further site assessment, development of a site recommendation, recommended funding sources, timing, phased approaches, stakeholder commitment, and operational impacts to be brought back to council by September the 30th, 2024.
Okay, thank you. I'll accept that motion. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think we need to do a lot more work on this. If this is a type of facility that should be constructed in our community, it needs to be in the right location. It needs to be well thought out. We need to cross a lot of the I's and dot the I's and cross the T's. Yeah, there's a lot of more work to do. And administration appears to be comfortable with the timelines by September the 30th. And that ultimately will give us a better opportunity to consider it from a capital planning standpoint, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much. It's now open for discussion and debate. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I can support this motion. It accomplishes much of what I was trying to do with my choice of the ones that we were given. I'd just like to take this opportunity to just offer one more comment. I did appreciate the work you did. It was clear, it was concise. I think you answered the question that you were given, and thank you. That's all, Mercatcher.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion and debate? Not seeing anything on close. Okay, so this motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. That is carried. Thank you very much. All right. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is Chabot Park River Valley Staircase. Grant Schaefer presenting. And associate, I'll let you do introductions.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. I'm Grant Schaefer, Director of Fleet Facilities and Engineering. With me today is Leo Girard, Manager of Engineering. We're here to present the feasibility study for the construction of a River Valley staircase in Chabot Park. On October 25th, 2022, Council passed a notice of motion to study the feasibility of constructing stairs into the River Valley near the lift station in Chabot Park. The study was to define options, conduct geotechnical investigations, and provide Class 5 cost estimates with operating costs. Through the geotechnical analysis, a concrete-filled screw pile system was recommended for all design options. 3 options were developed for the staircase materials. All options take advantage of the terrain, creating landings and lookout points along their length. As well, all options incorporate a bike ramp to help push bikes up and down the staircase. The first option is steel frame construction with steel open grading similar to the staircase in West Park, which was constructed in 2017. This option is the most costly to construct, with an estimated construction cost between $380,000 and $570,000. It would, however, have the least maintenance costs, as the steel treads and landings would allow snow to fall through, requiring little to no winter maintenance. As well, the steel treads and landings are robust with little long-term maintenance required. The second option is a timber structure with wood surfaces and railings. This option includes a heavy timber structure with wood decks and stair treads. This option has the least construction cost, but the highest maintenance costs. Construction costs are estimated between $280,000 and $420,000. This structure would require snow removal of each stair tread and deck and landing. The treads and decking would wear over time and are susceptible to damage, requiring repair and replacement. As well, the wood structure would require regular maintenance to protect the timber from weather damage. The third and recommended option is a hybrid of steel structure with wooden decking at landings and viewpoints and steel open grate stair treads. This estimate has a construction cost between $320,000 and $480,000. Some winter maintenance would be required as the landings would need to be shoveled. However, the steel stair treads would allow snow to pass through. As well, the bike rail and the stairs would be wood, which would allow pets to use the rail rather than walking on the open steel grating. Operating costs were estimated by our Parks Department. The option 3 hybrid staircase has operating costs of $2,500 per year during the first 5 years, slowly increasing to $10,000 per year by the end of life at around year 40. This is due to the fact that as the staircase ages, more extensive preservation is required. The wooden staircase operating costs were estimated at approximately $2,000 per year higher due to the extra snow removal and the additional wood maintenance, with the steel staircase approximately $2,000 per year lower. During this process, an additional risk was identified relating to the construction of the staircase. The potential secondary water supply line is currently completing its pre-design stage, and the alignment will be through this area. Until detailed design and potentially construction of the line is complete, potential conflicts between the projects will not be known. This could add risk and cost to either project. For this reason, we're not recommending moving forward with the project today, but until at least more details are known so we can address those conflicts as we go. This report is being brought back for information, so we are presenting 3 alternatives. The first is Council may, just with consideration of the study, determine that no further action is required at this time and no motion is made by Council. As well, Council could refer the Chabot Park River Valley staircase for inclusion in the horizon list of the 2024 10-year capital plan. Thirdly, Council could refer the staircase for inclusion in the upcoming budget deliberations for placement within a specific year of the capital plan. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I'll remind everyone this is clarifying questions at this time. Councillor Harris.
So with respect to alternative number 2, inclusion in the horizon list, do you have enough information that ultimately then Council can sit down when we're having a capital budget discussion to suggest that this is something that we want to move forward with and then figure out timing at a later time?
Worship Councillor Harris, I believe we do. We know where it's going to be. We know the recommended materials and construction methods. Costs will change, obviously, depending on what year it actually gets put in, but in terms of today's cost, we have at least that starting point.
Yeah, when do we anticipate having more information on the alignment of the water lines? Because when I looked at that area down there, there is a fairly wide area. Are you looking at it as just a very narrow alignment or a broader alignment that ultimately allows us to go down that corridor?
Your Worship, Councillor Harris, will have the feasibility study wrapping up right now. Keeps the alignment fairly broad, but is narrowing it down within that corridor. The next step of detailed design would narrow it right down in terms of where we would need to be.
So if we were to select alternative number 2, that gives both administration and council time to consider, because I brought this thing forward from a safety standpoint and an amenity standpoint going forward. So would that allow us to have appropriate discussion with more information on the table?
Worship Councillor Harris, I believe so. The intent would be if it was on the horizon list, once we had some of those risks mitigated and known what they are, then we could have that discussion with council again about what the timing would be if council wished to move forward.
Yeah, I'm not looking for an immediate decision. I just want to move it along. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there additional questions? Okay, not seeing any. What is the wish of council? Go ahead, Councillor Harris.
I would move that council refer the Chabot Park River Valley staircase for inclusion in the horizon list of the 2024 10-year capital plan.
Okay, Thank you. I'll accept that motion. Would you like to speak to it?
I do. This is something that I believe is a safety issue, and I just want to make sure that we've had an opportunity to flush it out appropriately. It's a larger cost than what I anticipated. I think it's over-designed, quite frankly. But given the fact there's a 40% contingency in there, I guess that has to be considered. I think a staircase in that area makes eminent sense to give people access to the lower reach of our trail system. Because the slope that the trail is paved on right now is probably about, in the middle of it's probably about a 6 to 7% grade, which is way too steep for people to safely navigate in the winter. And so I think a staircase would ultimately provide a better alternative for people to reach down into the lower path in a much safer manner. But we need to consider it over time and just make sure it doesn't get lost. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at in terms of not losing sight to ensure that our trail system is safe. So that's where I'm coming from on this thing.
Okay, thank you for the motion, discussion and debate. Not seeing any. I'll go anything on close. You're all right. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. And the motion is carried. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Next item we have is Regional Agriculture Master Plan Regional Context Statement for the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board. Cherise Shindy and Taryn Samra presenting. I always have to check. Sometimes I say your name and you're not here.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. I'm Terrence Samra, and I'm here to present the regional context statement required by the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board for Council's approval. The purpose of the regional context statement is to demonstrate how the city's municipal development plan conforms with or diverges from the policies and objectives within the Regional Agriculture Master Plan. As a member municipality, Fort Saskatchewan is required to submit a regional context statement to the EMRB prior to December 20th of 2023. All member municipalities must create a regional context statement, and after the approval of the regional context statement, member municipalities must also amend their MDP prior to December 20th of 2024. The EMRB Growth Plan was approved by the province in October 2017. Preparing a regional agriculture master plan was a requirement of the growth plan. Council adopted the municipal development plan in January of 2021. The province approved the regional agriculture master plan in December of 2022. And the regional context statement is the first step of the implementation of the regional agriculture master plan. The second step is to amend the MDP in 2024. The Edmonton Metropolitan Region is home to some of the most productive agricultural lands in the province. The purpose of the Regional Agriculture Master Plan is to conserve and maintain these lands with the aim to support the regional food system, diversify the agricultural food production base, contribute to the growth of the value-added sector of the agriculture economy, and guide agricultural support of infrastructure investment. The Regional Agriculture Framework establishes 4 discrete geographic policy areas in the Edmonton Metropolitan Region. These RAMP policy areas consider existing land uses and future plans approved in the region. Policy areas 1 and 2, which aren't applicable to Fort Saskatchewan, focus on existing agricultural and non-agricultural land uses. Fort Saskatchewan agricultural lands are in Policy Area 3, as seen in yellow, which contains agricultural land that has been recognized within the Regional Agriculture Master Plan as lands planned for future growth, or lands that have been approved within a statutory plan. Policy Area 4, which is seen in gray, supports the urban agriculture sector. These lands are defined as built-up urban areas within Fort Saskatchewan. Prime agricultural lands are also shown as hatched in the map. These lands are considered as prime agricultural lands due to their soil and climate conditions and their geographic relationship with social and economic factors. The Regional Agriculture Master Plan provides a template for member municipalities to use when developing a regional context statement, which consists of two parts. Part 1 of the template is for member municipalities to update their MDP map to include relevant Regional Agriculture Master Plan policy areas and prime agricultural lands. Part 1 also requires to include any relevant policy definitions from the RAMP to the MDP. Part 2 of the template is to identify the applicable RAMP policies based on the policy areas 3 and 4, and if the MDP conforms with those policies. Administration prepared a list of proposed changes to the MDP, which include updating the MDP map to include the relevant policy areas, include the relevant RAMP definitions, and include developing a policy to which would include develop an urban agriculture master plan, which would address the applicable policies from policy areas 3 and 4. The entire list of amendments to bring the MDP into compliance with the RAMP can be seen in Appendix A within the Council report. And that concludes my presentation, and I would like to answer any questions that Council may have for administration.
Okay, so I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. What, if any, are the significant changes to the MDP or policy or life within Fort Saskatchewan that we would anticipate by complying with this request? And I say significant. I don't care about editorial changes within our MDP.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, I would say that the biggest policy change would be, or the biggest update to the MDP would be the inclusion of developing an urban agriculture master plan.
Urban agricultural master plan. Is that the same thing that we had the report on some months ago? Okay, I'll save my comment to when there's a motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Question. Given that there's a hierarchy of plans that exist within the planning framework in the province under our legislation, what would happen if we didn't do this? Is the EMR, and I'm not suggesting, I'm just wondering what if, are the EMRB plans at a higher level relative to things of that nature that affect all municipalities regardless of whether we choose to amend our, our own enabling legislation?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, so as mentioned, the RAMP was approved by the province, which mandates a regional context statement. At this time, administration is unsure what type of enforcement or what would happen if we don't move forward with a regional context.
Yeah, that's kind of a rhetorical question, but I was curious if a municipality was at all reticent about it. What's the upshot? And the answer to that is no. You don't know.
Unsure. Yeah, that's
okay,
correct.
Fair enough.
Okay, I've got a question. I read through this, so I guess my question. So, is it yourselves that created the areas that we're looking at changing? I specifically looked at 6.62 that all area structure plans shall. And if you read it, be in accordance with the terms of reference for ASPs and shall include but not limit to innovative and diverse but built forms, architectural styles, pedestrian-orientated designs, high-quality public realm, multimodal transit work, play, and on and on and on. And so it goes on with that. And it also says include one node per neighborhood acre of approximately 160 acres, 65 hectares, or within a 5-minute walk shed. What do you mean by that? That's in your policy 6.6.2. There's a whole bunch that you've listed in there. So what are you saying?
To your worship, so this is the policy in the existing municipal development plan. It gives direction to the future area structure plans, and the terms of reference that we created for the ASPs. So this is not relevant to the ramp. This is just the MDP policy, and only the portion D of 6.6.2 is relevant to the ramp.
Okay, so this is part of the MDP saying that there should be a 5-minute walk shed?
That is correct.
Okay, and what's a 5-minute walk shed to? Like, I read it and I just didn't understand it.
So basically, it's saying that we are creating walkable neighborhoods, and so the 5-minute walk shed is usually 400-meter radius. So if you create a 400-meter radius communities or 1/4 section, which is usually 800 meters by 800 meters, that's considered as a walk shed or a walkable community.
Okay. And the second question that I had, when it talks about preventing premature fragmentation of lands, so is that within our MDP too? And we're just taking it from there and copying, pasting?
To your worship, it is within our MDP.
Pardon?
It is within our MDP. It is a policy within the MDP.
Okay. That would... Okay. So, okay. Then, okay. Okay, I'll save the rest of my comments then. All right, thank you. Councillor Nguyen?
Yeah, thanks. I just had a question on policy area 4 regarding acknowledging topsoil as a non-renewable resource and then having discussion with neighboring municipalities regarding exploitation of soils. How could the implementation of these types of policies, or maybe will they affect development in any capacities to put more restrictions on what they do with the land as we further develop it? Because I don't really know what that means and what that would look like, and in terms of what effect it could have on development. Like what does that mean? Soil management, exportation of soils. Is there anything that you read into that you could elaborate on?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, I'll try to answer this question because this is new to everyone in the region. But basically the RAMP, the Regional Agriculture Master Plan, realizes the topsoil is a non-renewable resource. So one of the priority it sets is use it within the municipality, and if it's being transported to a different municipalities, manage it properly, because there seems to be some concerns about the quality of topsoil that goes within jurisdictions, and they may not be good for agriculture. So that communication needs to happen. That's what the RAMP recognizes. How it will happen, that needs to be further explored through the regional processes as well, and the region will give further direction to us. Municipalities do ask for agriculture impact assessment, and one of the section with these assessments is the management of topsoil. So that is something municipalities do and ask for these reports at the area structure plan stage.
Okay, thanks for that answer. It's kind of what I was expecting to hear. I look at there's a massive topsoil pile in Cambrian, and so like in essence, this is suggesting that we don't move topsoil, to different jurisdictions, I suppose, and that's kind of what I was asking about, if it would put limitations on developers on what they could do with land. But I think you've answered it in enough detail for now. Just want some clarity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harris.
So picking up on that question. About 2.5, maybe 3 kilometers south of Fort Saskatchewan on the east side of Highway 21, there is a piece of land where the clay is being mined, and they are exporting the clay, which is the lower, subsurface of the land. I assume that the topsoil has been stockpiled. So that wouldn't preclude the transportation of clay, just topsoil?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, I'm not 100% sure about the clay and how that is managed, but this policy direction is just about the topsoil.
Yeah, and I realize we have to be concerned about what we do within our community, but Strathcona County obviously has approved that, and I'm
We'll keep
curious
that for
about
debate.
that. Yeah, no, I'm just asking her, about whether or not that's something that we would have to be worried about.
To your worship to Councillor Harris, I'm not sure, but I think these are the conversation that RAMP is encouraging us to have moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I do have one more question. It's probably, I don't know whether you can answer or not. Under the RAMP policy number 3, agriculture future transition lands, the RAMP policy says agriculture lands in policy area 3 will remain in agriculture use until the lands are needed for population and or employment growth. So based on that, I guess the question that I have is really, why do we need a context statement? Because if we're growing or we've got economic development, why are we being held to a higher standard? And why is that required? Because it seems to be a free-for-all.
I'll try to answer that, Your Worship. Yes, so our lands, our developable lands or future lands for development are within the policy area 3, and the RAMP recognizes that these lands will be utilized for urban development at some point or other. So that is accepted. I think the regional context statement is for all 13 municipalities, and municipalities who have lands within policy area 1 and 2, they probably have to do more changes to their municipal development plan compared to us. So it is just to identify whether we need to make any changes or not. And for example, the policy example that you gave, we don't have to do many changes in that regard.
Okay, I appreciate that, but my question is, for that policy to be written that way, isn't really open-ended, that the moment anybody requires something for employment growth or population, it's just wide open? I'm trying to drag this.
For me, the intent of the policy is to avoid leapfrogging so that the development occurs in a contiguous and responsible manner.
Okay, there's nobody else for questions yet, so further questions. So is leapfrogging not addressed, though, through the growth plan already? Because I believe it is.
Maybe there is a policy on that.
Janelle, did you have an answer?
To your worship, yes, I believe there is policy that speaks to leapfrogging, but with this particular policy, when you're designing a neighborhood, it's much easier to do it with one owner as opposed to many. So I believe the intent of this is to limit how much fragmentation you have within a quarter section so that the land is easier to develop and design when it's needed. I would see this policy as a bigger hindrance to the rural municipalities than to the urbans. But it does leave the municipalities with a lot of flexibility.
Okay, thank you. And I'll hold my comments for debate. All right, not see Councillor Harris.
So, question, if we pass this, we could always rescind it or modify this because it's within our legislation, correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, yes.
Good. So this is just a step along the process if we so choose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Noyan's my alternate, and he actually goes on sometimes and listens, so why don't you make the motion? Because I won't give up my chair today for this.
I'd be pleased to. So I'll move that council approve the Regional Agriculture Master Plan Regional Context Statement required by the EMRB as presented in the attached Appendix A to Council reported October 10th, 2023.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Not too much to say other Other than that, as Janelle mentioned, I think this was a lot more significantly than it does us, given the map of the agricultural lands that exist in the Fort Saskatchewan area. So I'd support this motion as a intermunicipal collaboration initiative.
Okay, thank you. It's open for discussion and debate. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I see Mr. Thomas in the back row up there, avoiding my glare. I remember when this urban agricultural plan thing was brought to us the last time. I also remember my complete and utter dismay with having to read something that trivial. And that's not your fault. Please don't misunderstand me. I failed to see why the EMRB would bother itself with this stuff. So having said all of that, I would just hope, and I'm not asking for a response, hope that administration is not going to spend much time or effort or resources in developing an urban agricultural plan. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll support this, but my comments go with number one. When I asked about the agriculture master plan for urbans, it was basically just, it can be as many as 2 or 3 lines. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, so that's good. When I look at the ag master plan, when we were doing the growth plan, it was really about we need to conserve, we need to protect, we need. But what I have found since that time, and I know I drive Mr. Fleming crazy at our meetings, is that there seems to be a double standard. And I find the urbans, I think, are held at a higher standard for ensuring that we have to conserve our land as much as possible. When I drive around and I see employment growth areas, there's always going to be more employment growth areas in rural than there is in probably urbans because they have the land base and they also most of the time have lower taxes. I have said this at EMRB too, so I'm not saying anything that I haven't said in public already. And I just find it's frustrating for me when I sit there and I read this and it talks about the fact that they want us to provide all the things that we're going to do. And yet, although I hear you say, well, it may be tougher for the rurals, I've just experienced it's actually a lot easier for the rurals. It's a new employment growth area. They got the land, they got the place, they can go out, they've got the money, and they're going to do something. So I have really struggled with the EMRB in the last month or two because of some of the conversations that have happened. And it's really around this. Either we're going to do this or we're not. And I have stated this as well. If we're not going to all have to follow the same standard, then I don't know why we have a growth master plan. Just let us all grow the way we want to. And of course, and I'm venting right now, when I make that statement, it's like, oh no, we have to absorb all the population. We'll let the new employment areas get the new tax dollars. So I have been very vocal about this, and I just say what's fair for one is fair for everybody. I will support this because it is a requirement, and that's why I just wanted to make sure that we're pulling it out of our MDP and that we're not putting in a higher standard than, that we're being more prescriptive than we would see that we need to be. So that's my vent, and I will go to Councillor Nguyen to close. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate these comments. They're extremely valid for in the perspective of somebody sitting on council here in Fort Saskatchewan. I don't have too much to add here, so yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then the motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. And that is carried. Thank you. All right, we're going to move right along. Bylaws C10-23 to amend the business license bylaw C20-22 for 3 readings. Aaron Brush Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here today. I'm Erin Brush Duncan, Director of Economic Development. The purpose of this presentation is to provide Council with information regarding proposed bylaw C10-23, which repeals Business License Bylaw C20-22. Bylaw C10-23 removes a redundancy from the existing Business License Bylaw C20-22 by eliminating the temporary business license, which is an underutilized option. Just a little bit of background. In January to March of 2021, administration began a 5-year review of bylaw C9-16 to improve clarity and efficiency. This process included consultation with the business community, as well as other city departments, to identify potential improvements to that bylaw. The feedback gathered was incorporated into the business license bylaw C20-22. On June 14th, 2022, Council passed Business License Bylaw C20-22, which introduced seasonal business licenses. The current business license bylaw includes 3 terms for business licenses. We have the temporary business license, which is 28 days, the seasonal business license, which is 120 days, and a normal business license, which is for until the end of the calendar year. Now, the seasonal business license and a regular business license, there are both resident and non-resident options. I'd like to go over some of the key changes in the reasoning. So seasonal business licenses were introduced in 2022 to meet the needs of businesses that were not wanting that full year business license, but needed a business license that was valid for more than the 28 days of that temporary business license. Seasonal business licenses are valid for 120 days, which provides more time for the businesses to complete work. Examples of businesses that are utilizing the seasonal business license include landscaping companies, snow clearing, construction, tutoring, and a few others. Following the introduction of the seasonal business license in 2022, the temporary business license option is redundant. Removing the temporary business license will streamline options for both businesses and administration. The temporary business license can be eliminated with the removal of 6.a within the business license bylaw C20-22 as shown. I'd like to discuss some of the impacts. So the impact to the business license revenue from that removal of the temporary business license is expected to be negligible, as businesses will be transitioned from the temporary to a seasonal business license. Just a few things to be aware of are that the seasonal business license fee is 50% of what the full year fee for either the resident or non-resident would be. The 2023 and proposed 2024 fees for resident seasonal business licenses are less than temporary business licenses. Non-resident seasonal business license holders will experience a slight increase in business license fees compared to that temporary business license. You can see that in the table. The valid term of the seasonal business license is 92 days longer than a temporary business license, which, as I mentioned before, allows businesses ample time to complete work, go through a permitting process if they're in construction, etc. Just to be aware, as of this morning, we currently have, we've issued 43 temporary business licenses this year. Should business license bylaw C10-23 be approved, economic development will communicate to the business community about this change through multiple methods of communication, including the city's website, social media, and e-newsletters. It is administration's recommendation that council proceed with 3 readings of business license bylaw C10-23, repealing the business license bylaw C20-22. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there questions? Councillor Harris?
Thanks. Can you give me an example of a temporary business license a company that's carrying on a temporary business license, unless I missed it in the report.
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, most of the temporary business licenses are contractors who are non-resident contractors who are applying per our requirement. If you're doing any work to apply for some of your permits, that you have to have a valid business license. So they are applying for a business license, doing the 28-day temporary license. But what we're finding is oftentimes during the process between, applying for permits and things like that, their business license would then kind of expire before all of the work is being done.
So would those groups fall under the seasonal business license as non-resident then?
That's correct.
Okay, so it would cost them a little bit more, but ultimately they'd have a little longer period of time to do what it is that they have to do.
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, that would be correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Macon.
So 43 temporary licenses so far this year. How many of them switched to a seasonal?
Through your worship to Councillor Macon, that's for this year, when temporary licenses are still in our bylaw. If we were to remove that, we would be suggesting that those businesses then for 2024
Sorry,
look at...
you said, I think you're going down the wrong direction there.
Oh, I apologize.
That's okay. I'll just clarify. So you had mentioned that you're seeing a trend where you issue a temporary business license and it gets switched to a seasonal because the work is not completed. Is that what you meant?
Through your worship to Councillor Macon, currently we have not been always mandating that switch unless we know that that project is going to be 2 and 3 months. Sometimes if it's only going to be extended a few days, we give a little bit of grace there. But it's something that we've noticed over the last few years that people who are applying for that temporary business license are not able to go through the permitting process or to start their work and to finish it within that 28-day period. And we'd like to be more consistent with how we handle that.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I have a lot of questions. I'm trying to narrow them down into a few. So 43 was temporary business licenses issued last year, correct? You said that was the number of temporary, or was I'm still confused. So, or was that seasonal?
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, I've got our current count. I had our executive or our economic development officer pull this morning. So in 2023, we've issued 43 non-resident temporary licenses. We've issued 53 non-resident seasonal businesses, and for resident seasonal businesses, we've issued 4 so far this year.
Okay. So question about seasonal business licenses, because you mentioned about snow removal. Mm-hmm. So when the calendar rolls over to January 1st, they would have to obtain another seasonal business license to operate during the winter months, January through March. Is that correct? So how does a seasonal business license benefit those types of companies?
Absolutely. So with our current business licenses, if you sign up for a year, it is through the end of the calendar year. So as of December 31st, that's your last day of a valid business license. So to be valid in the next year, you would need to apply for a new one. However, for seasonal businesses, I'm not sure, as this is something that was just introduced last year. I would have to check to see if any of them needed to roll over or apply for an additional license.
Right, and I think that's what the policy reads anyway. And I think the seasonal business license in definition is more for summer season, the applicability of it. The other question I had is what is the uptake of enforceability right now of businesses, temporary businesses that come on and do 1 or 2 jobs? What does that look like from our perspective of companies who are not possessing a business license right now and working in Fort Saskatchewan?
So
it might be more of a question for bylaw. I'm not sure if you have any insight.
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, currently, when we have worked with our bylaw to if we're aware of any businesses that, for instance, have applied in years past but didn't apply for this year, we do have that list, and we ask our bylaw to go out and check. But at this time, we, to my knowledge, and maybe it's a better question for bylaw or for maybe Janelle, but to my understanding is we're not actively going out and doing proactive enforcement. But if anybody were to apply for a permit, they are required to have an active business license. So when they apply for that permit, that check is being done at that time.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
That information helps. I
I'll
appreciate
just
that.
go to Ms. Cowie to see if there's any enforcement or how they deal with businesses when they're driving around.
I think, through your worship, to Councillor or to the Mayor, I believe what Aaron had said is correct. It's more on a complaint basis in terms of if we are hearing a complaint that somebody is operating and they've had a previous business license. We just not something that we're regularly doing as municipal enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's ample information. Thanks.
Okay, you're good. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. When I first glanced at this, the changes seemed obvious, so I admit I didn't spend much time on it. But I'd like to follow up on the line of questioning from Councillor Nguyen. When I looked at it, I imagined a seasonal being a 6-month license. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, our seasonal licenses are a 4-month period.
Okay, 4 months is fine, and it's still 4 consecutive months. So if I apply for a license to remove snow November 1st, that seasonal license, that does not expire then till February 28th, 4 months down the road.
I would, through your worship to Councillor Kelly, I'd like to confirm in the actual business license bylaw, but I believe it's 120 consecutive days.
Same thing. I'm good with that. But it doesn't expire. I thought I heard the comment that it expired on the calendar year and you would have to reapply.
Through your worship.
And I missed that, so please.
It'll be B in the new adjusted one. Terms of business license, B, every business license.
Just put your, just put your microphone on and tell us where you're referring to.
If you go under section 6, terms of business license, so A has the seasonal, but then it says every business license, not specifying seasonal or non-seasonal. It ends on December 31st. So unless that's amended, I would take it as that the seasonal one is included in there.
Okay, you've answered the questions so well. Can come back to you.
Through your worship to Council.
Precisely. Thank you. Continue.
Sorry. Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, I will absolutely take a look at that entirety of that business license, but I believe the intent was for a resident business or a non-resident business for the full year. It ends on December 31st. I will need to review the seasonal.
Okay, you're good.
Just to add to
go ahead, Janelle.
Yeah, just to add to Ms. Brush Duncan's comments, that is a good catch, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. It appears like 6A and 6B are competing with each other. They're saying two different things, so some additional clarification is worthwhile.
Okay, so I guess the question that I'll have too is, are you going to want to make a change to that before we go into approving this? We can take a small break if you want to, Mr. Fleming. Or
it's either that or refer it.
Or would you like us to refer it to the next meeting?
Yes, through your worship, perhaps I'll just ask council not to make a motion on this one and just leave it be as is for information, and we'll bring it back with the amendments. It's probably just easier that way.
Okay.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Good catch. All right, so if there's no other questions, we're not going to go down a motion. We'll have that coming back. Then we don't need to do a referral. Okay, we'll move right along. Thank you very much. We'll move right along to next page, 8.2, bylaw C8-23, amending Southport Area Structure Plan, Bylaw C523, and Bylaw C923, amending Bylaw C2320, the new direct control DCA 22, first reading. Do you want 5? Okay, I'm being asked for about a 5-minute comfort break. So it's 4:40, 4:45. Will that do it for everybody? Okay, we'll be in recess then. Okay, we will resume the meeting, and we are on 8.2. Mandy Chan, Cherie Shindy, and Craig Thomas. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of councils. My name is Mandy Chan. I'm the planner with the city. I'm here to present Bylaw C8-23 to amend Sub-4 Area Structure Plan and Bylaw C9-23 to amend the Land Use Bylaw to add a new Direct Control District titled DCA 22, Street-Oriented Public Service and Commercial Mixed-Use District. These two amendments will be happening at the same time as they are co-related. Also, please note that in the council package, a technical report was also included to provide detailed analysis of the application and justifications. For the outline of today's presentation, we will start off with the planning framework, and then we'll be jumping into the proposed amendments, analysis and rationale, communication, and lastly, questions. As a refresher, planning occurs within a legislative framework. The Municipal Government Act, MGA, gives directions and establishes the planning framework. The framework is divided into 3 levels of responsibility: provincial, regional, and municipal. We are here in the municipal ramp, and the MGA sets out hierarchy of the planning documents, what those documents do, and how they relate it to each other. As circled on the slide here, these documents including the MDP, ASP, ARP, and the Land Use Bylaw, which includes redistricting application, and at the bottom of the triangle are development permits and subdivisions application. Today, we are here to discuss an area structure plan and land use bylaw amendment. Let's start with the proposed amendment. Administration received applications submitted by Altera Engineering on behalf of Sub-4 Development Corporations to amend 3 planning documents: Sub-4 Area Structure Plan, Bylaw C8-23, Land Use Bylaw, Bylaw C9-23, and Sub-4 Ridge Meadows Outline Plan. The main intent of these amendments is to facilitate a church and commercial development on the subject site. Starting with the Sub-4 Area Structure Plan Amendment. The proposed ASP amendment is to enable a church and commercial developments on a site that is currently designated as a medium-density residential development. The proposed amendment includes updating the land use concept plan to replace existing medium-density residential located along Greenfield Link and with public service and commercial mixed use. It also revised Appendix A development estimates and also the executive summary to reflect on the changes in the land use designation. Sorry, I didn't. This slide here shows the proposed amendments to the land use concept plan. On the left is the existing Sub-4 ASP land use concept plan. And on the right of the slide are the 2 proposed changes to the land use concept plan by replacing medium density residential with public service and commercial mixed use. This slide here shows the proposed change to the gross developable land in hectares in the development estimates. The net residential lands are reduced by 1.26 hectares. The number of the residential units and population will decrease accordingly. The density will need to remain in the range of 25 to 30 dwelling units per net residential hectare. The ASP executive summary will need to be updated accordingly. Moving on to Bylaw C9-23, Land Use Bylaw Amendments and Redistricting. The subject site of the proposed amendment is shown in yellow. The subject site is located along west of Greenfield Link, north of Southridge Boulevard. It is close to the storm management facility, a potential school site, and Leslie McMillan Park in the Sub-4 Meadows neighborhood. The subject site is currently zoned as Medium Density Multiple Residential District, RMM, and would be redistricted to the proposed DCA 22 district. Now that we know where the location, I will give an overview of the amendments. The proposed amendments for the bylaw C9-23 includes adding a new direct control district to the land use bylaw and also redistricting the subject site from medium density multiple residential district to the proposed direct control district. For context, I wanted to highlight what is a direct control district. A direct control district is a unique type of land use district. Unlike in a conventional land use district, direct control districts are applied to a specific site only. They are for if council wish to exercise particular control over the use and development of land or buildings within an area of the municipality. They must comply with the city's statutory plans. They have a customized land use designation. They include regulations that are site-specific or limited to the proposed location. And in this case, the direct control district is intended to facilitate a standalone place of worship, church, and a separate buildings for commercial uses. The proposed district is named Street-Oriented Public Service and Commercial Mixed Use. This proposal is intended to have a setback of a minimum of 4 meters with a maximum of 8 meters to public roadways. The building will be with a maximum of 2-story and limited to a maximum height of 14 meters. The minimum number of the parking stall will be 121 for the entire site. The site development patterns will generally conform with the site plans, which is shown on the top right of the image, and architectural treatment shall conform with the church concept, which is shown on the bottom right of the image. Moving on to the South Fort Ridge Meadows Outline Plan amendments. An outline plan is a non-statutory document that addresses land use and servicing and further refines the detail provided in the ASP. Outline plans are required to conform with the overarching ASP as well as the MDP. An outline plan amendment application has been submitted along with the land use bylaw amendment application. The proposed amendments to the outline plans includes replacing street-oriented medium-density residential with public service and commercial uses, remove the area of the medium-density residential future statistic, and add public service commercial mixed use under the non-residential land use statistic. Please note that an outline plan is amended by council resolution, which require a singular motion from council. Details of this application will be brought forward to council before bylaw C9-23 given second and third reading. Analysis and rationale. In the Municipal Development Plan, MDP, the subject site is designated as developing neighborhoods in the bright yellow color. The MDP also identified the subject site as a node. A node is described as a walkable neighborhood center and local destinations for adjacent residential areas. Nodes generally contain high-density residential development, neighborhood-scale commercial use, civic facility, and cultural, recreation, and social gathering spaces for the neighborhood. The design and character of the node should incorporate a high-quality standard of agriculture and landscaping and a diverse range of amenities with a strong sense of place and identity. Moving on to rationale. Based on the submitted amendments, administration does not support the application because it does not demonstrate a node functionality. The node functionality as the subject site was envisioned to include a medium-density residential. It should be also including a street-oriented development with high architecture and landscaping standard, and also reducing parking. The site plan, parking layout, and the church concept does not align with the node's intended function. Direct control districts are adopted to facilitate a site-specific development that is warranted due to the unique characters of the site or the development. The proposed use under this district are very broad and do not align with the district's purpose and preliminary concept. The site plan illustrated 2 building envelopes, one of the commercials and the other for the place of worship, one specific use for each building envelope. In our opinion, this does not demonstrate the functionality of a mixed use, and it is not a development that serves multiple purposes. Mixed use is typical a vertical development with diverse complementary use in the same building to create vibrancy. What is being proposed can be served by existing land use district, C1, Neighborhood Retail and Service District, and PS, Public Service District, that permits the intents of the standalone uses. The creation of the direct control district is not warranted. And also, in our opinion, the removal of the medium density residential developments widens the affordability gaps within the neighborhoods by reducing the planning housing diversity. For communication, should Council give first readings to the bylaws, a public hearing will be advertised in the Fort Saskatchewan records. The landowners within the South Fort Meadows neighborhoods will be mailed a notice. A copy of the proposed bylaws will be available on the city's website. The target date of the public hearing is October 24th, 2023. Recommendation. The recommendation is that Council give first readings to bylaw C8-23 and bylaw C9-23, and further that a public hearing be scheduled. And at this time, I would like to answer any questions that Council may have for administration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. We will go into clarifying questions. Go ahead, Councillor Harris.
I'm looking at Appendix C for bylaw C8-23 and C9-23. And I understand that administration is not recommending the change of land use designation from medium density to direct control or for, we call it institutional, commercial. And then when I look on the South Fort Area Structure Plan map, it's also attached there too, and the South Ridge Meadows Outline Plan, I don't see any other church sites other than one that's directly across the road from the high school behind the DCC. I find that actually on reflection kind of odd, because typically when we do large planning documents like this, I'm trying to understand, why don't we just give me a second. So typically there are things in land use plans that ultimately show where churches will go. There's only one in all of South Fort. Why is that, and why isn't there more in relation to some categorization of future uses for institutional use or places of worship or whatever? That's the question.
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, maybe I'll start and Mandy and Craig can add to it. So this site shows the potential locations where the church could go in our land use bylaw under C1 district.
Where?
Church is a discretionary use. So under commercial sites, church could take place.
I'm missing it. I'm looking at this map, but I don't see anything other than two.
What color is he looking for?
Sorry, through your worships to Councillor Harris. So on the slide here, anything that's located with red in color, they are designated as commercial, but it is also as place of worship as discretionary use.
Okay, I don't see red, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
I can actually, if I may.
That's brown.
Your worship, what we can do between now and the next meeting is get that map reoriented so it's bolded instead of shaded.
Well, it doesn't really matter. I just asked the question. I can't see red, so I don't know what you're talking about. But so what you're saying is there are other areas that could accommodate the church other than this location. Even this location is on a corner and two major roads, which typically wouldn't that be a good location for a church?
Your worship, to Councillor Kelly, maybe I can add to
That's
that.
Councillor Harris.
I'm sorry. I've
You
done
got
that
him on the
before. I
brain, man.
apologize.
Okay.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you.
So yes, this what this map shows is the different locations within the southern part of the city, which would allow for a place of worship to exist. You referred to the area structure plan, which identified one institutional location, which is across from the Dow. That being, I guess, more of a broad document would kind of identify where a potential site could be. However, as Mashindi has pointed out, it could be allowed within several other places. The other thing that's worth noting is this is a direct control district. It is site specific, and it is proposed that it take the place of a medium density site. There's nothing that would stop the applicant from proposing a direct control, which would allow for a place of worship on an area that would be designated as low density as well. So as a direct control, it could be located essentially anywhere if it's a direct control.
Is that direct control administration or direct control council?
Through your worship, to Councillor Harris, this is direct control administration.
Okay, thanks.
You also mentioned the point about this particular location maybe being an appropriate site for a place of worship. I wouldn't dispute that, but I think there are probably other places as well. The municipal development plan has identified this as a node specifically for its location as well. And so that planning has gone into it to establish this area as being a node, which would be a place of mixed use where you would have that commercial residential mix, also with gathering spaces, and having that density kind of start from the outside or the inside moving out. So.
Okay. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. How do property taxes work when we look at property designated as church? It's my understanding, but the question is, do churches or is there property taxes assessed and paid on church property?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, it is my understanding that churches are exempt from the tax, municipal tax.
How would it work in the case of a mixed use piece of real estate, where two separate buildings and one church, one commercial, and a parking lot are situated on one title? How would we assess taxes in that situation?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, the landowner will be paying tax on non-institutional portion of the site. Not exactly sure how the parking lot would work out, because I think here they're proposing sharing of parking lot. So if it is under church, they're probably exempt from the tax there. Commercial property will be paying tax.
Okay, and if I may continue, Mayor Catcher, is there anything stopping a requirement or prohibiting a requirement to insist that if this were the particular piece we were looking at, that in fact it be split into two parcels and two separate titles, so that it would be easy to determine which is church and which is commercial?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, that it is a possibility that it could be split, depending on where that line would be. would establish which would be not be paying taxes and which one would be.
It creates an interesting question and pushes the discussion back to the property owner. And I got one more question, but I can wait if you wish, Mayor
Yeah,
Catherine.
I'll come back to you. Okay, I've got Councillor Macon.
Thank you. Do you have any idea how many potential homes are lost when you change this? And if you don't have that, that's okay. Maybe that can come back for second reading or the public hearing.
Through your worship, my guess is around 40 to 50 homes.
40 to 50. Has any work been done with the developer with this request on changing their plan in any way to meet the requirements of a node, or to, like, is it possible like that commercial area be required to be commercial with residential on top? Like, have any conversations like that happen?
Through your worship to Councillor Macon, we did have some conversations. However, a developer wanted to move forward with this proposal, so it wasn't explored in great lengths.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm next in the speaking order. So I just want to confirm, though, when we're talking about density targets and loss, can you confirm that through the EMRB, the density is less than 0.1 residential unit per hectare on the greater portion of it, and that what does the EMRB? Is this significant and it has to go in for amendment, or is it insignificant and doesn't need to go in for an amendment?
To your worship, this will not trigger the ref application to the EMRB, because we will still be within the range of 25 to 30 dwelling units per net residential hectare, which is what the target is for this plan.
So we'd still be meeting the target?
Yes.
Okay. So the next question that I have, and it actually comes out of the previous thing that we had on the ramp one, the MDP saying 6.6.2, one node per neighborhood. Can you show me in that map? No. So when I drive over there, there is, unless you're on the highway or just off 86th maybe, there are no nodes. So does this not conform to 6.6.2?
Your worship, so 6.6.2 refers to new neighborhoods. So these would be new area structure plans within the area that's just been annexed.
But to my point, my question, if there's no nodes in that entire area right now, why would this not be something that would be welcomed? Because it's a node, there's no nodes there.
Through your worship, to your worship, yes, this area is being visioned as a node in the municipal development plan, and in the node we would like to see medium to high density residential development, which then kind of reduces as you go away from the node, along with the diversity of uses. So church is one of the uses. If our preference would be seeing it in combination with residential use, so that we do not lose that housing option, especially that is more affordable housing option.
Okay, I'll come back on my questions. I keep going on this. Councillor Nguyen?
Yeah, thanks. I want to talk about the node functionality a little bit more, because I don't really have a great understanding. So the proposal, as per ASP prior to this application, or as it sits right now, has medium density residential mixed with commercial space in this node. Is that correct? So like this parcel of land was divided somehow. It's not something like a house, residential over top of commercial or something like that. Because I'm trying to clarify what the node would be as as recommended by administration initially.
Through your worship to Councillor Nguyen, so in the existing area structure plan, this site is a medium density site and a potential mixed use. So it may or may not have commercial, however, it was always envisioned as street oriented medium density site.
Okay, so
And that becomes the part of the overall node. That medium site across from it is a higher density site than the stormwater management system, the rink, and everything that you have in the vicinity that makes it a node.
Okay, so it's just more an infrastructure definition as opposed to the surface use of the location itself is what's defining the node.
The node is where all the uses come together, the community comes together.
Right.
So it's
which
so
it
it
seems like this fulfills. Confused.
You're good.
One more question. Would this be considered an innovative, built form compared to what we have for similar institutions in Fort Saskatchewan?
Through your worship, Councillor Nguyen, I would say this would be similar to something that would be consistent with a C1 or a neighborhood commercial type development that would allow for neighborhood commercial, something like a 7-Eleven. It does also have the provision for a church as well. So the fact that there are pad style development, the appendix to the district shows an image of what this could look like. And you've got parking, quite a bit of parking. So it would be pretty synonymous of a vehicle orientated development.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to round two. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I'm looking at in our package, it's page 153, and I think also page 2 of the proposed bylaw C823. And there's a map there. And the map indicates essentially across from the Catholic high school, there's a purple area marked as institutional with a little insignia that would suggest potential private school site. It was my understanding that that site included land set aside for a potential church. It's been my belief of that. I mean, I believed that for a long time. Am I wrong?
Your worship to Councillor Kelly, you're right. That site is owned by a church group.
That entire site's owned by a church group.
That's correct.
Great, which gets me to my question. How do we assess taxes on that particular piece of property that's owned by a church group?
Mr. Fleming.
Through your worship, there's no place of worship constructed on it, so it would be my understanding that they're paying property taxes for their. But I'd have to look into that. We can look into that and get back to you for the next council meeting. I've never been asked that question before.
Would you please? Because if there's no church built on it, it's speculation. It's an investment, right? And there should be property taxes paid on an investment. Would it be possible to build into the development permit or the zoning a timeline for construction so that we don't end up with a vacant site in this particular location like we have in across from the Catholic high school? It's been vacant now for 20 years at least.
Through you, your worship, Councillor Kelly, it is something that's possible. We would need to look into it. It's referred to as a sunset clause. It's not typically done on lands that are zoned or within the zoning, but it has been done. It would be something we would need to look into. What comes to mind is the arena downtown. There was, I think, a provision built into that agreement that construction has to start within a certain period of time.
I thought it was part of the direct control that we could put these sorts of things into the zoning.
Yes, and I believe that is the instrument to do it. It's just the details of how I would need to look into it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just one last question for you. When you talk about mixed use and you talk about community comes together, so what's your interpretation of a church that community doesn't come together in a church?
So, Your Worship, when it comes to node development, the node is defined. It's also set out within specific policies within the MDP. So it does talk about gathering spaces, but there's a difference between gathering spaces and assembly. So gathering spaces are more in reference to, where you've got an active street with a variety of uses that will draw people to the area. It also would include things like parks and plazas and those types of things. When you have a type of a use, it could be something like, a church or a place of assembly. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a gathering space in context with the policies that are in the MDP.
Okay, I'll just
Can
leave.
I add to that?
Sure.
So again, the residential component is a big component of the node. We are not against the church as a use. However, the church with the residential component on that site would work better. Like the whole site would work better as a node. Also, the church gathers people only when there is an assembly. So it's probably 1 day out of 7 days. So in terms of the activity level of that site, it's not going to perform the same way as different mix of users. So,
okay, I just have one more question because I keep hearing the medium density. So I guess the question really that I have is when I drive around all of Southport, so we've got the estates, it's got a collector, we've got the meadows, which is kind of the next layer down, and then we have a whole whack of density in there. So if it's not significant to the EMRB and it's only 0.1 when they look at the entire area, why are we so bent? Why is planning just so bent on just continuing to densify? It's okay, you heard my rant about the MRB at the last thing, so now you know where I'm at. Why are we, no, I'm asking planning, why are, because of all the density, why are we so fixated on more medium density and not having something maybe a little bit different, community gathering?
To your worship, yes, the density is not an issue in this case. When we did our municipal development plan and followed it by our biannual update to the MDP earlier this year, we looked at our statistics, like our population, how much of single detached housing we have within our municipality, which comes to 70%. And based on our current recent update to the MDP or the review that we did, it showed that 56% of our population cannot afford that single detached product. So we do have a gap in terms of affordability, and this medium density housing, which is in the form of townhouses, is, in our opinion, essential to minimize that gap. That is the reason we are not in favor of removing medium density.
If I could add to that as well, because Shree's exactly right. We're not opposed to the issue of the density. I think it's what's actually going to be happening on the site. Within this particular area, there's been a few instances where townhouse type development has been removed through amendments, which I think have been positive, but it is reducing that townhouse type development. Within the outline plan, which those details will be coming forward, it does identify this as being street-oriented townhouse type development, which does add to that character. And again, I'll go back to the policies because the policies really kind of spell out and lay out what a node is. And I think what our main concern is here is that what this is going to result in is something that's not going to result in a node. And so if it's not consistent with our policies, that is really the basis of our recommendation.
Okay, I'm good, and I'll make my comments at the next reading when it comes forward or at the public hearing. Councillor Harris?
So looking at the South Fort Ridge Meadows outline plan, which shows the site in question as medium residential with a star on it, says possible mixed use opportunity, which is what you're defining as a node. Kind of a collaboration. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Then what's the difference? 100 meters to the east on the high density residential site with a star as well. What's different there? And why would that not suffice for an appropriate node for that area to achieve the policy directives that are in our MDP or ASP relative to that particular type of planning? I mean, there's, you know, that's going to be high density, but I mean, what a perfect location for that type of stuff. Why the angst with this site then?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, you're right, like even the high density site becomes the part of that node. It is the high density, the medium density site together that increases the functionality of the node because there are more people living there. There is more activity happening there. And the node is all about vibrancy, activity, and coming together. And then as you go further west, the density decreases. So that's why you're going from high density to medium density to lower density areas.
But I'm trying to understand the concept of the node relative to, it would almost make sense to me that it would make more sense to have a node within a high density residential area because then you do have that. So that's what I'm trying to understand. Okay, so I think we've flogged that one enough. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly, you had yours. You're good? Okay. All right, so I'm not seeing any additional questions. Somebody wish to put a motion on for first reading? Go ahead, Councillor Macon.
I can make the motion that council give first reading to bylaw C8-23 to amend South Fort Area Structure Plan bylaw C5-23 as presented.
All right, thank you very much. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I think there's a lot of discussion here. I think it's going to be a really interesting debate, but I think the logical next step is to hold the public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any discussion and debate on first reading? Not seeing any. Anything on close?
Nope.
All right, the motion is now closed for first reading. Please cast your vote. And that motion is carried. You can continue on with the
second motion.
Second motion.
I'll make the motion that council give first reading to bylaw C9-23 to amend land use bylaw C23-20 as presented.
All right, thank you. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just the same as the last one.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion and debate on first reading? Not seeing any. Anything on close?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, the motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. And that motion is carried. Okay, thank you very much. All right, moving right along, we will go into notice of motions. So we will deal with the notice of motion. Councillor Harris, Fort Saskatchewan Lions Club loan request. You may read it in.
Yes,
Oh, you have to push your button.
yes, I'm glad.
Just a second. Go ahead.
I would move that council approve the Fort Saskatchewan Lions Club interest-free loan request in the amount of $150,000 for the Fort Lyons Campground Expansion Project, with the funds to be taken from the Financial Stabilization Reserve, subject to the following conditions. 1, the development permit approval is granted and all associated permit conditions except those of a continuing nature are met, and funding agreement between the City of Fort Saskatchewan and the Fort Saskatchewan Lions Club is completed and includes a 5-year reimbursement plan. And finally, the provision of financial statements of the Fort Saskatchewan Lions Club.
All right, thank you. I'll accept the motion. You wish to speak to your motion?
I do, and I support it on the basis, and I'm bringing it forward because I think that the Lions Club have provided an amenity, a community amenity that I would classify as a user pay facility, which is not costing taxpayers a dollar. They have operated the campground on city-owned land. It's a city-owned campground, and they operate it. And they've demonstrated an ability to do so in a responsible manner, in my opinion. And I believe that that particular request is an opportunity to help them move forward with the next phase of expansion. Council has already approved the campground expansion. We've done that by changing the zoning in that area. And this is the next step in that. And this loan will help them be able to do the planning and the preliminary work to move the project to the next phase. So on that basis, I put the motion forward and look for council support.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will go into discussion and debate on the motion. Councillor Macon. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question for administration. The Lions Club request was based on 50% of their project estimate. I was just curious if the city has seen any documentation on that estimate.
Through your worship, I have not seen the documentation on that, but it's possible that it got submitted with a development permit, so I would need to actually follow up.
Okay. So then I guess further to that, then the development, so that is expected through the list of things that Councillor Harris has on the conditions, we would see the project estimate.
Not necessarily. They have to declare the project amount with the development permit, but they don't necessarily have to submit any documentation to it. So we could ask for that, but in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't our intent to be sticky to the 50% funding of the project. It was, this motion refers to $150,000. If the project is more than that or less than that, it doesn't necessarily change the amount of the loan.
Okay. I'll just put this out for consideration by council. I won't make an amendment yet because I'll just look for if anyone else wants to make comments on it, and if they don't, that's fine. Under the last one, the provision of financial statements, I would welcome adding to that also 3-year revenue estimates to be included with financial statements so that we can get a written idea of their expectation of their revenues, like where, I guess, why they think that they can repay it in that time. So I am fully supportive of this motion. That being said, I know that there's been a lot of emails in and a lot of information regarding around whether or not to expand the campground. And I do believe that we have already had exhaustive conversations about that and have made that decision already when we permitted that use of that space. So whether or not we give this money, that it's going to go ahead. It would just go ahead in a longer time frame. And through the permit approvals and the associated conditions, there are lots of things that have to be met before they can go ahead with that. And so I am satisfied in that regard. But just from a financial standpoint, I think it would be worth looking at also them providing that revenue estimates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly on discussion and debate.
Yes, thank you. It's my understanding, and I'm looking for confirmation, if possible, please, Troy, that the arrangement or development agreement with the Lions Club calls for them to use best efforts to respect and not damage what I'm going to call the large mature trees in the area. And for better understanding, I'll say non-aspen large trees, because I don't consider aspens to be anything particularly special. Is that the case?
Yeah, through your worship, I don't know how specific it gets to the trees in that regard, but I know it was and will be a requirement of the development permit that they're not to clear cut any area that's not like required for the actual stalls themselves, and that there do need to be efforts made to preserve trees where possible, especially mature trees.
Okay, thank you. I would have thought, and this is probably again for you, Troy, and I'm following up from Councillor Macon's line of questioning. The motion calls for, includes a 5-year reimbursement plan. I would assume that as part of that discussion with administration, that administration would get a decent understanding and come to grips with what their revenue model is and their profit model is off of the campground, even though you might not share it with council. Is that correct?
Yeah, through your worship, we hadn't planned on getting into detail on the I guess you could say the business plan around the expansion, but I think it's something that's easy for us to do. What we can do is ask for a bit of a revenue projection from them. They actually believe they'll pay this back sooner than the 5 years. The 5 years is more, it's got a bit of contingency built in there. But we can ask them for that, sort of a revenue projection to help support their ability to repay.
And that's great. I just point out that includes a 5-year reimbursement plan. So to have a plan, there must be some sort of due diligence and homework done to ensure that the plan is achievable. That was really my point. I'm going to support the motion. Again, I made the comment like 30 seconds ago that I don't consider aspen trees to be huge significance. I had the good fortune to plant in my backyard 15 years ago, 15 aspen trees. I had to go out this year and buy a Sawzall with a 10-inch blade so I could cut the roots out of my lawn and stop the suckers from taking over my entire yard. And I firmly believe that if I left my yard alone for 2 years, it would be nothing but an aspen grove. So I think that the location is good. I think the Lions Club, despite the comments that we've heard to the contrary, operate a respectable facility. And I will suggest that while I've never personally stayed there, we've had family and friends that have and have spoke well of the place. So I support the motion. I agree with Councillor Harris's comments that it is, at the end of the day, it's on city-owned property, and it is, in reality, a city asset. And it is operated and built at no cost to the taxpayer, and it is an amenity, and that's one of the very, very few within the city that meet that particular business model that I'm particularly fond of. So I think it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm next on the speaking order. So the question of the financial portion of this. So there was precedent setting with the boat dock. So we loaned them $80,000, and it's my recollection that was paid back like within 1 year, maybe 2 at tops.
Yeah, through worship, I think it was a couple of years. It was paid back fairly quickly, though.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. And the second, I guess, comment, which is similar to Councillor Kelly's, this is a municipal campground that has a name on it. And at the end of the day, even if the Lions Club ceased to operate, it becomes a municipal, returns back to the municipality, and we just recontracted out, correct?
Yeah, to your worship, I wouldn't even use the term that it's returned to the municipality because it's ours. But I understand what you're saying, and yes, we would either operate it municipally or look for another operator. That's correct.
And then the final comment or kind of question is, so prior to the Lions Club taking it over, just confirm the city operated it and we just contracted it out and it was a break even.
Yeah, through your worship, I do believe the city just operated at a cost recovery model.
Right. Okay. So I am going to support the motion. Sometimes I'm a little envious when I go to some of these other municipalities. I'm going to say Stony Plain has got an exceptional campground. I drive up by theirs and it's really quaint. Once again, it's tree covered. When I drove through this one, when they had the official opening, very tree canopied. I think there was very little damage that was done to the trees. And, we have a lot of residents that use it. It is a park. I believe that, there's going to be a little bit of work that's going to have to be done. But when we talk about the loan, I'm very confident that the Lions Club, they paid $80,000 back in basically less than 2 years. So I'm quite confident that they have the ability to take this on. So I will support this motion. Councillor Nguyen?
Councillor Makin's comments just made me gather a question, because there was some discrepancy in what we heard of the reports of usership for this campground. Did the Lions at all submit a statistical report from the last expansion that happened, and what their numbers look like over the course of the last summer or two, I believe now?
Through your worship, we've never asked or required them to submit their statistics on their fill rates.
Right, and I think that'd be okay because that'd be captured in the financials if we're going to receive them anyway. Yeah, I think this makes sense. I'll be voting in favor of it. It encourages tourism, diversity, and a vibrant downtown core. It's in the location where they've done significant amount of work, and infrastructure is in place to continue with that extension. So happy to support.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing anything else on discussion and debate. Councillor Harris on close. Any button?
The reason that I'm bringing this forward is because I believe that this is an opportunity to develop and to continue to develop to its ultimate fruition a campground that is an amenity for our community at large, for both our residents and visitors to our residents or to our community. And the Lions Club is a means to the end to achieve that. It's part of their overall organizational charter to be able to give back to the community. They do so in many ways, and I think that this particular loan request helps them do that. At the essence of this whole thing is a contentious campground or a contentious development in the minds of some people, and we heard from a number of them tonight or this afternoon, and we will continue to hear from them, I suspect, for a long time to come. But when all is said and done, I believe the campground will be fully developed over time, and eventually there will be trees down there. The woodpeckers will live in that area. The lady slippers will be there in between the campsites. I think it's really important to note that we are not clear-cutting the land down there. The Lions Club will do selective tree clearing to produce the access into that area and the campsites as part of that area. And that the question was asked: will they attempt to minimize major tree destruction? And I would suggest that they are already aware of a council's requirement for that, and that will likely be the case going forward. And so between those trees and that development, kind of from the trail that goes through there, the paved trail that goes through the park, to River Road, there will be minimal destruction. It will not be clear-cut in the minds of some people. And plus, we are not touching any of the trees that go from the trail right up to the back of the residences at the top of Bank that Ms. Cockrell made reference to this morning as part of the shelf or whatever it is. So I think it's important to recognize that it is the development of a community amenity, and it draws people to our community, and I think this is a means to an end. It helps the Lions Club in that regard. We will continue to hear opposition to it, unfortunately, But when all's said and done in 10 years, it'll be finished, and I believe that will be the end of that particular discussion, I hope. So that's all I have to say on the matter.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Are there any new notice of motions? Go ahead, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Would it be possible to get the motion in front of us, please? I noticed a typo and I don't know whether it's been corrected or not. Okay.
Through your worship, because you haven't given them,
that's fine. I'll
just
read
it
the
with
way I
the
wanted to
correction
read.
and then give us the language afterwards.
Perfect, thank you. And the typo is very minor. In the written version, it referred to October 16, 24, which should be 23. That's all. So I'm giving notice that at the October 16, 2023 regular council meeting, I will move the following motion. That council direct administration to return to council with an administrator report on the potential options for conducting a public survey to gauge the level of support within the community for the recommended aquatics facility concept from the recent indoor recreational facility program review report, and that the survey be run concurrently with the upcoming 2024 census, and that the report include references to the benefits and potential issues of different survey delivery options, a description of the survey process, including survey delivery, supplementary information required for the respondents, data collection methodologies, and the process alignment with Council Public Engagement Policy Gov 006-C, draft wording of a non-binding question that allows the general public to offer support or non-support for the project, and lastly, the costs of generating all supplementary information in addition to promoting and administrating the survey. And that the report be brought back to council before the end of February 2024.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other notice of motions? Not seeing any. Are there any points of interest? Not seeing any. Are there any councillor? Are you on interest or inquiries? Okay. Any councillor inquiries of administration?
So we entered into a new contract for the installation of new intersection safety devices, which is being operated by a third party. That's been in place for about 6 months now, I would imagine.
Your worship, the hardware has been in place for about that long, but the cameras, the tickets themselves have only been issued for about a month now.
Okay. Is there any information you can bring back to council relative to how suitable these new devices are and their ability to do the things that we are proposing under the safety model in terms of moving to, obviously stop people from speeding or running red lights? So the essence of my question is, can you provide an update to council relative to where we are with the installation of those devices and whether they're moving us along the track to where we would like to be?
To your worship, I think we can definitely follow up with that. I would say let's give us a couple months now that we're live, and then might be something we can make a priority for early in the new year, if that is acceptable.
That would be more than, I just wanted to see if, I didn't realize we hadn't been issuing tickets for that length of time. So anyways, yeah, that would be fine. Just want to have that as a bit of information that would be useful for council in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had one question as well. I know the City of Edmonton put in a new tax program for derelict properties. Have we given any consideration, since we have a few of them in our community, specifically there's some in the downtown? Have we thought about that?
Through your worship, we hadn't thought about it. It's not actually something that crosses my, in terms of the complaints that we get or the community issues that are brought forward. So I know it's a significant problem in the City of Edmonton, but I'd say for now, if you want, just give me a couple of weeks to actually take a look at the program, and then if we want to follow up with it, we are doing a strategic planning session with council this fall, so that might be a good candidate for something to put on the list for priorities, for upcoming priorities.
And I just asked that because we did the grand opening of the daycare or the child care center, and right beside it is a derelict property that's all boarded up, and by the apartments there's another one that's all boarded up, and by the United Church where the fire is, and nothing's happening with them. So I guess that's just a question that I thought I would throw out there.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably worth looking at if we do believe it's a serious concern, and my recommendation would be to bring it up as part of the conversation of the strat planning session, and then we'll make it a priority.
All right, thank you. Councillor Nguyen, question?
Yeah, just being reminded of traffic. There was I believe there was a contractor this summer that was optimizing traffic light timing at various intersections. I don't know what the extent of that was. Has that program been completed now and everything is deemed as optimized as much as possible, or is that ongoing? And the reason I ask is probably the most of my feedback as a councillor comes from the light timing and very few vehicles able to get through a couple of specific intersections.
Yeah, through your worship, I haven't been made aware that there's any issues with it and that they're still looking at it. But if you do have any feedback on that, you can send it in to me, and I can or we can discuss it with the engineering and see if they deemed it to be complete or if they're still working on it. I can follow up on that.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right, not seeing any additional ones, I'll take a motion to go into confidential closed session. Councillor Macon.
I'll make the motion that we move in camera for reasons covered under FOIP.
Thank you. Close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that is carried. So we'll return into the back for closed session. Thank you.